The Lord of Mages, I ruined the tech tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, Grand Duke Norton's operations make people darken their eyes. Agree? Or not? This is a question. Viscount Cummings actually didn't care about the second condition offered by Leon. Where to purchase materials is not procurement. If Antolia can provide them, then there is nothing wrong with purchasing in Antolia, which is a creditor. The only thing he was worried about was the first condition offered by Leon. As a nobleman with a normal mind, Viscount Cummings knew very well the consequences of agreeing to Leon's conditions. He basically knew what the Antolia Bank was all about. Is there really any difference in essence between putting it in the Antolia Bank and putting it in the hands of the Ximena family? Even though the gold diggers who came from afar praised the existence of the Antolia Bank, as a noble, Viscount Cummings had to consider more. My Lord Marcus. Viscount Cummings couldn't help but reveal a solemn expression. However, Leon did not give Viscount Cummings a chance to bargain. Think about it, do you not have enough money now? Yes. Viscount Cummings replied with a wry smile. In that case, you use the funds borrowed from Antolia to buy Antolia's materials. Is this equivalent to the Ximena family paying for you to buy them? Yes. Since it is Antolia's money, isn't it reasonable to deposit it in Antolia Bank? Yes. In that case, all you need to pay is the future taxes of Parma City. And at the same time, you even got a rebuilt city for free. A southern town that once belonged to the Bravis family. To be honest, Leon really didn't plan to make much money from Parma City. His purpose in doing this was, first, to allow Antolia Bank to leave Antolia, and second, to allow the workshops on this land that prospered due to the construction of the new city to continue to operate after the construction of the new city was completed. The prosperity of business is inseparable from the circulation of funds. And for Antolia, which has no business at all, this is actually the fastest way. Viscount Cummings felt that Leon's words made some sense, but not much. Yes, the conditions offered by Leon did seem very reasonable, even kind. But if he really agreed, then who will decide the future of Parma? Or will Leon decide? What's the difference with the enclave of the Ximena family? Exclamation mark. However, the situation is stronger than people. At least there is no other choice for Viscount Cummings. Except for the Ximena family, which swallowed up the wealth of the Bravis family, no noble in the south of the kingdom has enough strength to support him to rebuild Parma. So, after a period of extremely painful entanglement, Viscount Cummings finally signed his name on the newly drafted agreement. He knew. From now on, although he is not a vassal of the Ximena family in name, he is actually no different from a vassal. Dong dong dong. My Lord Marcus. Just as Leon had just sent off Viscount Cummings who came from afar, and continued to think about how to expand Antolia's influence in the south of the Andal Kingdom, according to his own ideas. Todd, who pushed the door in, brought Leon a news that was enough to shock him for a whole year. The reason is simple. After the civil war in the Kingdom of Andal ended, the friendly neighbor to the west of the Kingdom of Andal, the Principality of Norton, also broke out in a civil war. To be honest, at least according to the news from Leon, the reason why the civil war broke out in the Principality of Norton was completely a copycat crime. Because the current Duke of Norton, Sanger Brandon, is not only in his prime, but has also inherited the throne for more than 10 years. It is completely incomparable with the Kingdom of Andal, where the Queen just died. However, reality is not always in line with common sense. What's more, the Duke of Norton, Sanger Brandon, has never been a monarch who conforms to common sense. Perhaps it was because of the civil war in the Kingdom of Andal that the Duke of Norton felt a threat that did not actually exist. Or perhaps the Duke of Norton suddenly went crazy and became abnormal. He did something that even Leon, a time traveler, was extremely shocked. Cut down the vassal. You know, the Principality of Norton is not a fish that slips through the net under the feudal fiefdom system of Antolia. Moreover, even Leon did not dare to touch the feudal fiefdom system with lords and vassals as the core before Antolia's strength was not enough to crush all opposition. But it was precisely under such an era that the Duke of Norton really made the decision to reduce the vassalage. Although the remaining trace of reason prevented him from depriving his vassal of his titles, he required the redefinition of the territories of each noble territory to prevent the nobles from becoming too powerful and threatening his power as a lord. And this was like stirring up a hornet's nest. The noble rebellion that people loved to see naturally followed. The nobles in the four directions of southeast, northwest, and northeast collectively attacked the Duke. A faction of claimants supporting the Duke of Norton's younger brother, Fred Brandon, was formed almost overnight. It took only 3 days to surround the capital of the Principality of Norton. No noble supported the top-down reform of the Duke of Norton, Sanger Brandon. If nothing unexpected happened, this meant that the civil strife in the Principality of Norton would end quietly before it reached Anatolia. But if nothing unexpected happened, that was obviously impossible. As early as the civil strife in the Andal Kingdom, the Kingdom of Walrus in the north had already sharpened its knives, ready to give this huge kingdom a head-on blow when the Andal Kingdom was in the most dangerous time. But the joining of the southern allied forces calmed down the rebellion at a speed that was beyond everyone's expectations. At this time, just when Sardar of the Kingdom of Walrus, the actual ruler of the Kingdom of Walrus, was hesitating whether to continue to do things according to the previous plan, the Principality of Norton, which was also adjacent to the Kingdom of Walrus, suddenly rebelled again. For Sardar of the Kingdom of Walrus, this is simply great news. The national strength of the Principality of Norton is not as good as that of the Kingdom of Andal. Since the Duchy of Norton was also in rebellion, the pagan troops that had originally planned to invade the north of the Andal Kingdom turned their spearheads and rushed towards the Duchy of Norton. So, the original civil war in the Duchy turned into a three-way melee between the Duke of Norton, the nobles of the Duchy, and the pagan army of Walrus. Leon was not actually worried about the situation in the Duchy of Norton. But the problem was, in the current Duchy of Norton, there was still a caravan from Anatolia. Know today, on the way. Chapter 152, the Marquess of Anatolia arrives in Dolan City. As we all know, there is almost no business in Anatolia. It is only after the addition of the Anatolia Bank that the CBD of the Thorn territory is no longer just a bakery or other small vendors. However, this does not mean that the Ximena family does not even have a caravan. Long before Leon obtained the title, the Ximena family had a small caravan under its command. Its main task was to import hard-earned food from noble territories in various places for Anatolia, so as to fill the food deficit in this land. Now, with León Ximena becoming the owner of this territory, the number of caravans controlled by the Ximena family has increased several times. Especially after Leon took over the legacy of the Bravis family, those who used to be businessmen for the Bravis family were transferred to Leon's hands without any obstacles. Merchants, loyalty to the nobles is to make money. Since the Bravis family has fallen, it is natural that there will be no discomfort in seamlessly connecting to the Ximena family. If it were any other caravan, being trapped in the Principality of Norton might not have concerned Leon too much. But the caravan that is now in the territory of Anatolia is the one that has been loyal to the Ximena family since the Ximena family took over Anatolia. Almost all the members of the caravan are veterans who have retired from the Anatolian mercenaries, and they are the most trusted group of people by Leon. The purpose of their trip is to use the western part of the kingdom to open up the market of the Principality of Norton with the first batch of clothes made of goose feathers from elk geese in Anatolia. Even if this caravan is destroyed, it will not cause a blow to Anatolia's military strength. But as the Marquess of Anatolia and the patriarch of the Ximena family, Leon will never watch those veterans who have been loyal to the Ximena family all their lives die in a foreign land. Stein. So, almost immediately after receiving the news, Leon gave Stein a very serious order: select dozens of good players from the Anatolian mercenaries, and make sure to understand the situation of the caravan stranded in the Principality of Norton. The members of that caravan are all veterans who have retired from the Anatolian mercenaries. As long as I am still the patriarch of the Ximena family, I will never give up any soldier who has contributed to Anatolia, even if they have retired. Yes. Hearing this, the mercenary leader, who seemed to be noisy on weekdays, couldn't help but become serious. He didn't care whether Leon's actions were to win over the hearts of the Anatolian mercenaries. He only knew that all the Anatolian mercenaries were family members who fought side by side on the battlefield. What's more, although the task given by Leon was to go deep behind enemy lines and could not get any support from Anatolian mainland, the Anatolian mercenaries under Stein were not unprepared. As early as when Leon returned to Anatolia, The young Marcus gave important instructions on the future planning of the Antolia mercenaries. He pointed out that comprehensively strengthening military governance is a profound change in the concept and method of the Ximena family's military, and is an inevitable requirement for accelerating the construction of an Antolia military force with the Ximena family as the core. He emphasized that the Antolia militia is the shield of Antolia, and the Antolia mercenaries are the spear of Antolia. As the direct leader of the Antolia mercenaries, Stein must fully carry forward the Antolia tradition of hard work, take the ability to win battles as the core of the core, the focus of the focus, and hone the Antolia mercenaries into a powerful military force that can win in various environments and under various unfavorable conditions. To put it simply, the conventional military tasks of Antolia must be undertaken by the Antolia militia. The Antolia mercenaries must serve as the sharp knives and blades in the hands of the Ximena family to perform those more difficult and dangerous special tasks. During this time, Stein has been faithfully practicing Leon's instructions. Not only has the selection process for applying to become an Antolian mercenary become more stringent, but also in daily training, they have also taken ruthless measures. This is the only full-time mercenary unit in the entire land of Antolia. When you return from Dolan, the Antolian mercenaries will definitely bring back more news from the Principality of Norton. Standing in front of Leon, Stein vowed to guarantee. Yes, Leon plans to go to Dolan. As the largest gathering place for dwarves in the south of the Andal Kingdom, this town controlled by dwarves does not follow the laws of the Andal Kingdom. It is more like a country within a country located in the south of the Andal Kingdom. The two brothers Hillman and Sherman, who are now loyal to the Ximena family, are both from Dolan. As for the purpose of Leon's visit to Dolan, it is very simple. One is to build the shadow manipulator, and the other is to reduce the loss caused by alchemy. Although Leon had the complete blueprints for building the shadow manipulator, after Sherman saw it with his own eyes, the dwarf craftsman who had always been proud of his ability had to confess his helplessness. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialty. Sherman is good at building repairs, and Hillman is good at making weapons. It is true that when Sherman took over the blueprints of simple machines such as looms, he could easily make them. However, facing the shadow manipulator with extremely complex internal structure, this dwarf who has always been quite confident can only let Leon ask for help from others. It's not that he doesn't want to take over, but that his major is really not suitable. As for Leon's second purpose, that is, the loss of alchemy, it is naturally caused by the further spread of the gold rush. The alchemy technology of Antolia is extremely limited. Even though Leon was a science student before crossing, he didn't have any way to deal with such an unpopular technology. There is no exam. What can he do? Exclamation mark. Therefore, in order to solve the problem that Antolia is facing now, Leon naturally turned his attention to Dolan in the south of the kingdom. In this alien world with a lot of magical power, the dwarves have the most exquisite alchemy technology and alchemy skills. Just as Sherman said to Leon before, the dwarves are natural craftsmen. Although the dwarves love to brag, however, on this point, Sherman did not brag at all. They are indeed the most skilled craftsmen in the world, without a doubt. Chapter 153 The Money Offensive from Antolia. Dwarves have two hobbies. The first hobby is to be a chatterbox and love to brag. The second hobby is to have a mysterious passion for all things that are golden. Therefore, when Leon took the heavy-looking cloth bag from the waiter beside him and opened it in front of the dwarf. In just a moment, when the golden stones were exposed to the air, Leon heard a slightly heavy breathing from the mouth of the old dwarf sitting in front of him. And his turbid eyes also burst into an obvious brilliance when he saw the gold. This is a very old dwarf. The wrinkles on his face were squeezed together randomly, and the gray beard dragged from the chin to the ground, so that the lowest beard was stained with dust on the ground and looked dirty. However, at this time, he had lost his previous calmness. His slightly short legs were propped up on the heavy back of the chair, so that he could lie on the table, staring at the bag of gold taken out by Leon. Looking at the scene in front of him, Leon's expression became a little complicated. He turned his head and looked at Sherman on the side, with a hint of doubt that was difficult to conceal. You know, the old dwarf sitting opposite Leon was the one Sherman had been strongly recommending before arriving in Dolan. According to Sherman's description, this old dwarf was one of the best dwarf craftsmen in Dolan Valley, especially for those extremely sophisticated machines, with extraordinary skills. This made Leon have countless fantasies in his mind before arriving in Dolan. But even though Leon already had a stereotype of dwarves in his mind, He still had some expectations for the master with extraordinary skills mentioned by Sherman. However, there is always a gap between reality and fantasy. Looking at this old man who was almost drooling, Leon's expression was quite complicated. In order to keep the previous conversation going, Leon had to wave his hand and signal the waiter behind him to put the gold exposed to the air back into the bag. Slurp. The white-bearded dwarf seemed to finally realize his loss of composure, and wiped his slightly wet mouth with embarrassment, but even so, his eyes would occasionally glance at the bag that looked quite old. As long as you can be loyal to the Ximena family, then the gold you saw just now will all be yours. Different methods are needed for different people. Since the dwarf in front of him has an almost crazy enthusiasm for gold, Leon was too lazy to make empty promises, and simply said it quite straightforwardly. The alchemy factory is fine. The old dwarf tried to calm his voice. Bidey is the most outstanding craftsman, with the best alchemy skills of this era. But, this. Before he finished speaking, the craftsman who called himself Bidey suddenly paused. He was thinking about those golden little stones just now, and for a moment he forgot the name of the nobleman in front of him. The Honorable Marquis of Antolia, His Excellency León Ximena. Sherman added hurriedly on the side. Oh. Yes. Bidey patted his head and continued, Respected Marquis of Antolia, the kind of machine you mentioned earlier, I need to see the blueprint first to know if I can make it. Although he was extremely eager for the gold in Leon's hands, Bidey still had his own principles after all, and would never exchange wealth for deception and fraud. Okay. Leon nodded. Then he slowly opened the blueprint of the shadow manipulator with his name erased on the table. At the same time, the dwarf's eyes gradually changed from the previous carelessness to more serious. I can do it. Finally, after a long silence, Bidey gave the answer with a hint of excitement. But. He paused, and finally mustered up the courage to say, it costs more. Leon actually didn't mind the idea of adding money. As long as his money was worth spending, even spending it with level and pattern, then he was willing to pay more. And the dwarf in front of him was obviously worth Leon's money. This was not only for his extremely exquisite skills, but also out of consideration for buying a horse's bones with a lot of money. Dwarves have always been frequent visitors to various noble territories. But how can Antolia stand out among the many noble territories and become the first noble territory that dwarves think of when they are short of money? The answer is simple, that is to spend money. Although dwarves love money, they have never been able to save money. Even if Leon offered Bidey a higher price, the dwarf in front of him would spend the money on the land of Antolia. What's more, he didn't just have the means of throwing money. Leon's purpose of coming to Dolan Valley was very clear, that is, to pack up some dwarves and take them back. But Sherman's purpose of returning to Dolan Valley was not just to lead the way for his Lord Marcus. So, when the deal between Leon and Bidey was reached, the dwarf who had been loyal to the Ximena family for many years couldn't wait to push open the wooden door of the room. And he was wearing a noble robe made day and night by the most skilled weavers in Antolia with moonlight velvet. And it was a custom-made noble robe woven stitch by stitch after taking full account of the dwarf's figure. He, Sherman, was a genuine honorary knight personally canonized by León Ximena, the Marquis of Antolia. Honorary knights are also knights. Although they were just small nobles at the bottom of the noble sequence, they were also nobles. Therefore, for him, this trip was not only to complete Leon's mission, but also a glorious journey for him to return home in glory. As the Lord, Leon was also happy to go with the flow, hoping to take this opportunity to let the wild people living in this valley see the generosity and kindness of the Ximena family. He even specially equipped Sherman with 2 accompanying guards. So, although he was a little short of height, at this moment, walking on the muddy path of Dolan Valley, shuttling between the densely packed houses and caves of the dwarves, Sherman, dressed in aristocratic robes, naturally became the most handsome guy in Dolan Valley today. At the same time, feeling the envious and astonished eyes cast from the dwarves around him. Deep in his heart, Sherman felt an unprecedented satisfaction for the first time. There is nothing to do today. I am thinking about the subsequent plot. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to give me some. Chapter 154, The Trivial Matter of Packing a Bunch of Dwarves. As a dwarf, Sherman is undoubtedly very successful. For example, the noble robe he wears is a symbol of his identity and status. Sherman is a technical noble. This is the explanation given by Leon himself when he granted him the title. In this era, The reason why most nobles can become nobles and have their own noble titles is that they have obtained the opportunity to be promoted by virtue of military merit. However, León has opened up another way to become a noble in the land of Anatolia. That is, even if there is no military merit, if you can achieve good achievements in a certain aspect and make enough contributions to Anatolia, then you only need to go through the extremely rigorous selection process of nomination, review and appointment by León, and you can become an Anatolian noble with a title. There is no doubt that as a craftsman who has been loyal to the Ximena family for many years, whether in the construction of the new city or in the operation of the Gloom slime factory, Sherman has given a satisfactory answer to León. This also makes Sherman the first dwarf to obtain a noble title in the land of Anatolia. You know, the purpose of León's coming to Dolan Valley is to bring back skilled dwarven craftsmen for Anatolia. And obviously, compared to León's self-talk, Sherman, who is also a dwarf, is obviously more convincing. Especially when Sherman walked into the familiar tavern, and in the listening of the dwarves around him, he boasted about everything in Anatolia and his life. The name of Anatolia will surely be widely circulated among the dwarves living in Dolan Valley. In fact, from a certain level, the character of the dwarves is a little twisted. On the one hand, they are proud of their innate craftsmanship and hope to obtain the wealth they dream of with their own abilities. But on the other hand, it is precisely because of the pride in their hearts that they can't bring themselves to serve in various noble territories. Only when the noble lords of the Andal Kingdom come to Dolan Valley to recruit in person, the dwarves living here will show their abilities. So, since he has come in person, León does not plan to go back with only 2 or 3 dwarves. Let Sherman go out and show off in a noble robe, maybe it can have an unexpected effect. After all, dwarves are indeed greedy for money, but this does not mean that they have no idea about noble titles. There is actually no conflict between the two. And the reason why noble titles are particularly rare among the dwarves is not because they don't want them, but because they can't get them. But León is different. Noble titles are not noble fiefdoms, so is it necessary to be so rigid? Antolia's talent introduction policy clearly states that for high-end talents who are highly in line with Antolia's current needs, not only will they be given resettlement fees and talent subsidies, but even noble titles can be negotiated. When Bidey tinkers with a shadow manipulator, León will have to arrange an honorary baron for him. This is also one of the benefits of being promoted to a marquess. León used to be just a viscount, and at most he was given a few honorary knights. Now, as a marquess, León has great autonomy and room for maneuver. As long as he can bring enough benefits to Anatolia, let alone titles like knight and baron, even honorary viscount and honorary earl, León dares to confer. In short, under Sherman's diligent show, the name of Knight Sherman is known to all dwarves. So when León returned from Dolan Valley, there were already several nests of dwarves in the carriage behind. Some of them are good at weapon casting, some are good at precision machinery, and some are good at building construction like Sherman. The main focus is a variety of directions. And this also makes León feel an unspeakable joy from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps Anatolia does not need so many high-end talents now, but there is a saying that it is better to be prepared. Anyway, after receiving the wealth of the Bravas family, the Ximena family is now very rich. Even the reconstruction of Parma City can be involved, and supporting 100 or so dwarf craftsmen is really not worth mentioning. What's more, even if the number of dwarf craftsmen recruited by León may overlap, who said he plans to stuff everyone into the factories and workshops in Anatolia to work? Digging for available talents everywhere can only be regarded as an emergency measure. In León's mind, only by allowing Anatolia to have the ability to cultivate talents can Anatolia truly become the leading noble fiefdom in the Andal Kingdom in terms of comprehensive strength. Of course, compulsory education is too outrageous. Not to mention whether León is willing to do it. Just looking at the current situation in Anatolia, it is absolutely impossible to do this. Compulsory education is good, but it must be combined with the reality. If all the people go to class, then who will go to work in the factory? However, although universal education cannot be carried out, it does not mean that elite education in a small range cannot be carried out. And this is the benefit that León provides to the martyrs' families in Anatolia. Before León became the Lord of Anatolia, many people died every year in this land. The Anatolian mercenaries, who are famous for their toughness, are the group with the highest mortality rate in the southern part of the kingdom. These brave Anatolians have paid their precious lives for the stability of the Ximena family in Anatolia. As a lord, León naturally cannot sit idly by. The pensions and job opportunities provided to the families of the fallen soldiers are just one aspect. Now that León has opened up the joints of the dwarves and allowed these dwarves to be loyal to the Ximena family, it is natural to carry out an elite plan in a small range. There is no way. Antolia is too short of talents. And Antolia is developing too fast. This time, the shadow manipulator can find a dwarf who can be made in Dolan Valley, but who can guarantee that the precision instruments that León needs in the future can also find professional craftsmen? So, elite education must be arranged. As for why the dwarves were willing to teach everything they had learned, the reason was simple. León gave too much money. If the money was not enough, they would give him a title. If the title was not enough, they would just promise him a promise. Anyway, the dwarves' principle has always been that Antolia earns money and Antolia spends it, and they don't take a penny home. Chapter 155 The Shadow Manipulator is so terrifying. Antolia, Southern Mountains. A dark black column of light descended from the sky. Countless black fogs spun in the air, condensed, and gradually took shape. If you look down from the sky, it is like the eye of a tiny typhoon, as if there is a powerful suction force that gathers the black fog in the air. León stood in a field not far away, looking at the scene in front of him from afar. Behind him, there were countless members of the Laprit tribe and countless people living in Antolia. Perhaps at the beginning, they did not understand what the strange-looking instrument meant. But when they saw the black fog that had spread to the foot of the mountain in this long winter, gradually dissipated under the drive of the rotating black column of light, a very complicated emotion emerged in everyone's heart. Shock? Excitement? Unbelievable? Or a combination of both? León returned to Antolia 3 days ago. And the first thing he did when he returned to his fiefdom was to settle accounts with someone. Therefore, Stein, the leader of the Antolian mercenaries, was fined 3 months military pay by León very smoothly. The reason was simple: he failed to fulfill the promise he made before. However, León had expected this. The Principality of Norton was so far away from Antolia, not to mention whether it was possible to find out the news about the Antolian caravan on the land of the Principality of Norton. It was impossible to complete a round trip in such a short time. The reason why León did not speak when Stein issued the military order was mainly because he felt that this guy was a little bit arrogant. How to say it? As a representative of the conservatives in the Antolian army, Stein's ability is obvious to all, at least in terms of military literacy and command ability. And Todd, the military commander of Antolia, also had high expectations for Stein. However, despite his outstanding ability, León and Todd had already reached a consensus on the point of beating Stein. As the saying goes, jade cannot be made into a useful tool without being polished. Arrogance has always been a major drawback of the Antolian mercenaries. As a former Antolian mercenary, Stein also inherited this shortcoming. Even when the Antolian militia was just growing up, he contributed to León's dark scene of being beaten up by a group of militia on the training ground. Therefore, if you want Stein to truly take on the responsibility of being the leader of the Antolian mercenaries, you must go through repeated tempering and beating. However, when León returned from Dolan Valley, there was no good news waiting for him. For example, after searching day and night, the Antolian mages finally completed the last piece of the puzzle needed to build the shadow manipulator under the leadership of Fast and the Archmage Albert. The ancient magic rune called Purification by the ancestors. Even because they knew how urgent it was for them to build the shadow manipulator, the Antolian craftsmen had already built all the scattered parts needed to build the shadow manipulator according to the drawings and the predetermined size. When León returns with a large group of dwarf craftsmen, all they need to do is complete the core structure of the shadow manipulator, and then the magician of Antolia will hand paint the magic circuit that they have finally obtained, and they can use it right away. Well done. After listening to Aaron's report on Antolia's work in recent days, León couldn't help but reveal a hint of obvious joy in his eyes. That's the shadow manipulator. It's what León has always dreamed of. As long as they have it, not only will the black fog that is gradually spreading towards Antolia be effectively contained. Even going to the abandoned land will no longer be a plan far away, but a set goal that can be put into action at any time. Just do it. If we can really contain the spreading black fog through the shadow manipulator, then the Ximena family will never be stingy with rewards. León raised his head and looked at the members of the shadow manipulator R&D team standing in a row in his study. and gave his own assurance very seriously. All mages participating in this project can freely choose the magic materials they need from the secret library of the Ximena family. And all craftsmen can get rewards of money and noble titles according to the degree of participation. At least 20 escudo gold coins. Leon added without hesitation. As you wish. Perhaps for the other two, the reward given by Leon was generous enough. But for a fast, if the shadow manipulator can be successfully built, it will be the best reward he has ever received. Mr. Marcus. Please allow me to engrave the magic runes on the shadow manipulator. Fast's voice was slightly trembling. Since he decided to be loyal to the Ximena family, this was the first request he made to Leon. During the days when you went to Dolan Valley, Priest Fast has been practicing the method of drawing the purification magic runes, and he didn't even dare to take a moment's rest. Aaron on the side added quickly. Of course. Leon immediately gave a positive answer. As the Lord of Antolia, Leon knew very well what the abandoned land meant to Fast. Although the old wizard had never been to the abandoned land, it was like being a master of Rome without having been to Rome. For the land shrouded in black fog, Fast always had an obsession from the bottom of his heart. Thank you for your gift. The moment Leon's voice fell, the old priest used the most solemn and serious etiquette to explain his gratitude to the young lord. So, this happened 3 days later. Looking at the black and purple whirlwind swaying in the air, Leon's heart, which had been hanging, finally let go. Because apart from the shadow manipulator, he didn't know what other methods could be used to curb the spreading black fog. Just as Leon had said to the soldiers of Antolia before, they should always be prepared to step onto the battlefield. If the shadow manipulator is really useful, then they can explore the land on the other side of the mountains while taking the initiative. But if the shadow manipulator is useless, then the other nobles of the Andal Kingdom will probably see a world-famous painting called On the Little Death of Me turning into a natural disaster and sweeping the kingdom after the shadow manipulator fails. There is no way. If the black fog continues to spread, then Antolia will inevitably face a food crisis. And for the survival of the Ximena family, Leon can only find a way to seek a new territory for himself in the north of Antolia. And this is exactly the meaning of hoarding guns while my neighbors hoard food. Fortunately, Leon is lucky. Or, the nobles of the Andal Kingdom are lucky enough. At the moment when the shadow manipulator was activated, the magic words engraved on this instrument bloomed with a hazy light almost in an instant, and at the same time, the black fog that had spread to the foot of Antolia Mountain began to dissipate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Abandoned land. Thinking of this, Leon couldn't help but cast his gaze towards the mountains in the distance. I can't update for the next 2 days. I need to think carefully about the setting of the subsequent plot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Nightmare Fuel. It must be said that the appearance design of the shadow manipulator is quite advanced. No, those drawings recording the shadow manipulator are the legacy of the ancestors after all, so to be precise, it should be more retro. The whole machine is roughly an inverted triangle structure. The living wood cut from the tree guards built a basic frame of the shadow manipulator and the 3 sides of the triangle. At the core of the triangle structure, a disc made of many magical materials including amethyst and obsidian is fixed. The purification magic word that Antolia's mages have spent a lot of energy searching for is engraved on this gem disc located in the middle of the triangular frame. The black fog that constantly gathers and rotates in the air gradually dissipates with this disc as the center. At the same time, the gems inlaid on the disc are like breathing lights shrouded in black fog, constantly flashing in the eyes of everyone. For the people of Antolia, they don't know how the strange-shaped instrument was born, nor do they know why the machine looks like this. But what they know is that the black fog on the other side of the mountains has always been the biggest threat to Antolia. It is true that under the influence of the black fog, there are biomes in Antolia that are completely different from the kingdom's inland areas, such as elk geese, Gloom and even the moon mushroom forest. Under Leon's governance, almost all of these unique biomes have become strategic resources for Antolia, bringing a steady stream of money and a large number of jobs to Antolia. The weaving workshop of Moonlight Velvet alone provides hundreds of jobs for women in Antolia. However, this does not mean that the Antolians do not hate the black fog. While bringing many unique features to Anatolia, it used to have the most barren land in the entire kingdom, and there were plateau hounds that would attack from the black fog every year of the jackdaw. Even though León has not yet brought great improvements to the lives of the Anatolian people, the black fog threat theory has always been an important concern for every Anatolian, including León. And now, they have seen the dissipation of the black fog with their own eyes, and they have seen the hope from the future with their own eyes. Throughout the territory, people who were originally in a state of panic due to the black fog finally settled down at this moment. Beside León, the craftsmen of Anatolia were writing down the coverage and operation time of the shadow manipulator. These data will undoubtedly provide a very useful reference for the next location setting of the shadow manipulator. Fast stood beside León. Behind him were a group of laprix, including Andrew. In the hearts of the Anatolians, the dissipation of the black fog meant that Anatolia would no longer be threatened, but for the laprix, it was not just that. Abandoned land. When conditions permit, León has always had an infinite desire for land. Let the laprix legion prepare for war. When spring comes, it will be the opportunity for the Anatolians to set foot in the abandoned land. After thinking for a long time, León finally gave the order in a deep voice. Although the Walrus Kingdom has intervened in the chaos of the Principality of Norton, it will not affect the Andal Kingdom in a short time, let alone Anatolia. If the Anatolians cannot speed up the pace of exploring the abandoned land while taking advantage of the precious peace period, they may be delayed by various messy things in the future. I understand. Fast nodded quickly and gave his answer very firmly. Since their lord is willing to give them the opportunity to return to their homeland, the laprix will naturally charge ahead and must not lose their chain at the most critical moment. My lord Marcus. Just as León was cheering up the laprix behind him, the Anatolian soldiers who were observing the situation of the shadow manipulator in the front row suddenly ran over. The soldier who rushed over was at a loss for words for a moment. After a brief pause, he said in a daze, "Some black translucent, pudding-like clots." León frowned and looked at Fast on the side. The construction drawings of the shadow manipulator only state that this machine can curb the spread of the black fog, but it does not specify whether other byproducts will be produced. Fast explained with a wry smile. Take me to see. In León's opinion, the dissipated black fog naturally could not disappear out of thin air. According to his original idea, the diffuse black fog probably eliminated the spiritual power that would affect people's minds in the black fog through the effect of purifying magic words, and then dissolved the original black fog into mist in a natural state. As it turned out, his idea was obviously slightly deviated. When he finally walked to the edge of the shadow manipulator under the protection of everyone, pieces of jelly-like dark purple solid blocks were twisting under the gentle breeze. A bit similar to the enchantment materials dropped when the advanced shadow monster died? No, obviously not. León quickly shook his head and denied the idea in his mind. After the black beetle died, it dropped a group of dark fog. Obviously, the jelly-like entity in front of him has already left the category of fog. Although they all look smooth and elastic, they are obviously not the same kind of thing. León drew out the long sword in his hand and tried to pick it. Different from the changes when stirring the enchanted material, after the sharp blade pierced the jelly-like black block condensed by the black fog in front of him, what was revealed was its densely packed internal structure like particles. Send it to the Lord's castle. León ordered very straightforwardly. Although it is not clear what the use of this thing in front of him is, as a byproduct formed after the shadow manipulator processes the black fog, it also comes from the scientific instruments of the ancestors, and it can definitely give an accurate answer. So, when the papyrus pulled out by scientific instruments was placed on León's desk, the string of characters imprinted on the top of the papyrus, as expected, attracted León's attention. Nightmare fuel. This is what the ancestors called this byproduct. Just this line of simple text caused a strong shock in León's heart and brought a huge surprise to the young lord. Fuel. What is fuel? Before León's crossing, strategic energies such as oil, coal gas, and natural gas can be called fuel. So, this seemingly ordinary byproduct in front of you may bring unexpected changes to Anatolia? Chapter 157. Hessner decided to learn autism. León has been in this world for many years. But in these years, he has never found the minerals that are widely distributed on the earth. Not to mention oil and natural gas, even the saltpeter needed to make gunpowder has not been found at all. As for the so-called coal mines in this world, they are only slightly similar in appearance and relevance, and the temperature when burning cannot meet the conditions required for the steam engine to reach the specified power. This has also greatly hindered the industrial process of Anatolia. And now, a special substance called nightmare fuel by the ancestors is placed in front of León. As long as there are enough shadow manipulators, and as long as the black fog that permeates the abandoned land still exists, nightmare fuel can be regarded as a strategic energy with extremely terrifying storage capacity. When he realized this, the young Marcus, who usually showed calmness, finally couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart and paced back and forth in his study. "Aaron!" León called out. "Mr. Marcus." The old butler who had been waiting outside León's study for a long time responded and came in. After León hurried back to the castle, he realized that his lord must have made some new discoveries, so he naturally followed and waited for orders. "Nightmare fuel. I just read the family history books. This solid condensed from black fog happens to be similar to the fuel recorded in the books by the ancestors of the family. From today on, send all the nightmare fuel produced by the shadow manipulator to Hillman and Biety. Make sure to understand the function of the thing." León found an excuse to call it nightmare fuel very smoothly. And Aaron also habitually did not delve into the loopholes in his lord's words. Aaron has always had a very clear self-positioning for himself. He is just the steward of the Ximena family. Even though León trusts him very much and even lets him shoulder the authority second only to León in the land of Anatolia, he is just a steward. Aaron always keeps a sufficient distance from his lord's secrets. "As you wish." Aaron nodded very seriously. He rarely saw such a solemn expression on León's face. "And this means, this thing, which is just a byproduct of the shadow manipulator processing the black fog in the eyes of others, may bring unexpected changes to Anatolia. He has always believed in the judgment of his lord. The birth of the shadow manipulator has injected vitality and vigor into Anatolia, which is in the cold winter. And for Ximena, his originally dull and difficult life has also undergone tremendous changes in this winter. His father is an Anatolian militia. But unfortunately, as the backbone of the family, Ximena's father died when the hounds attacked the city in the cold winter last year. If it were in the past, death would be death. Dust to dust, earth to earth. The name of Ximena's father will probably be gradually forgotten by the people living on this land as time goes by. When Ximena dies, the last trace of his father's existence in this world will also completely disappear. However, all this has changed dramatically in the cold winter of this year. On the west bank of the White Blade River, the new city of the Thorn territory began to be built. As the Marquess of Anatolia, León also gave important instructions on the construction of the new city and the Pantheon. But the instructions given by León were not only about the construction of the Pantheon. To the west of the new city, facing the Pantheon of Anatolia, the Anatolia Heroic Soul Memorial Hall is also under construction. The names of all the soldiers who died for Anatolia will be engraved on the stone tablet standing around the memorial hall and remembered by the people living in Anatolia. This is not formalism. It is an inevitable requirement to further enhance the national concept of Great Anatolia and improve the cohesion of the people of Anatolia. In addition, due to Ximena's special status as a family member of a fallen soldier and his outstanding performance in the previous literacy class, this young man under the age of 20 naturally became a member of the Anatolia Elite Program. The so-called Anatolian Elite Plan is a new policy launched by León after he packed up several nests of dwarves from the Dolan Valley. The purpose is very clear, which is nothing more than filling the talent gap in Anatolian. The dwarves from the Dolan Valley and the local craftsmen of Anatolian focus on training a small number of young people in order to adapt to Anatolian's demand for talents. Ximena naturally accepted the invitation of this elite project without hesitation. As a native of Anatolian, he has always cherished the land that gave birth to him. His father died on the battlefield defending Anatolian, and he naturally couldn't be a coward. So, Ximena, a young man who usually had to rely on literacy classes to learn to read and write, soon realized the horror of this project. The craftsmen of Anatolian taught him basic engineering theory, the dwarves of Dolan Valley taught him basic alchemy knowledge, and even the mage apprentices from Anatolian had to explain to him the most basic magic rune analysis. You know, he is not a mage. However, this is magic engineering, an emerging discipline proposed by León Ximena, the Marquess of Anatolia. Ximena does not need to learn magic, but he must understand the convenience that ancient magic can provide to craftsmen. For example, the shadow manipulator standing under the mountains is the first magic engineering machine created after the ancient magic is combined with knowledge in basic engineering, alchemy and other fields. The significance of the shadow manipulator is presented to everyone, and naturally people dare not underestimate this discipline called magic engineering by León. It is precisely because of this that the heavy schoolwork almost makes Ximena breathless. If it were not for the elite program college to receive a living allowance every month to subsidize the family, if it were not for his father to set a bright and majestic role model for him, if it were not for the clear knowledge of how much his lord expected of them young people, Ximena really didn't know if he could stick to it. So, in his opinion, only by learning to be autistic and fainting can he live up to his identity as the first batch of students in the magic engineering elite program. New map tomorrow. Chapter 158a, Antolia's most loyal lackey. León has full confidence in Antolia's talent training program. Although the course pressure is very high, there is no other way. If you want to industrialize magic, you need elite talents who are proficient in magic engineering, and if you want to have enough elite talents, there are only two ways. One is to improve the selection standards, and the other is to improve the training program. And the first one is obviously not feasible. Want to improve the selection standards in Antolia, where per capita prenatal education is required? This is nothing but a fool's dream. Therefore, it is not just Ximena. All those who participated in Antolia's elite program are complaining and tired. In response to such calls, León also responded very considerately. Take an exam every 3 months. If you fail to meet the standards in one exam, your allowance will be halved. If you fail to meet the standards in 2 consecutive exams, you will be eliminated. This is indeed cruel, but there is no other way. Fortunately, all the young people in Antolia are sunny and cheerful boys, and the dropout rate of the elite program has always been maintained below 30%. The capable ones go up, and the mediocre ones go down. Of course, the heavy schoolwork also brings obvious gains. For example, under the crazy stimulation of the students of magic engineering, the apprentices of the wizards who studied potions made unexpected breakthroughs. It's true that although the people who studied potions and those who did magic engineering were two groups of people, the serious internal competition of magic engineering also greatly stimulated the research enthusiasm of the apprentices of the wizards. If they couldn't come up with some results quickly, the apprentices of the wizards were really worried that León would do the same in the research of potions. So, the side effects of the little red bottle, that is, the red magic potion of Ramitriskawa, were successfully solved by the apprentices of the wizards of Antolia. And since there is a little red bottle without side effects, and the effect is improved by more than 20%, then the previous little red bottles with side effects naturally became the export version of potions of Antolia. In these days, the caravans from Cold City traveled back and forth to the land of Antolia again and again, intending to bring a little potion shock to the world in the near future. Yes, the caravan from Cold City. Not long ago, Cold City had a new city lord. After more than a month of bidding, Sir Nabondai, the honorary viscount and big businessman from the eastern part of the kingdom, finally stood out from many bidders and became the new vassal of León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia. On the one hand, it was because the price offered by the big businessman was indeed high enough. On the other hand, León was considering balancing the interests of the southern part of the kingdom. Although the number of vassals of the Ximena family today is still far behind that of the Bravas family at its peak, there is no doubt that León has actually become the largest noble in the southern part of the kingdom. So, even under the threat of the Antolian army, no vassal dared to challenge the authority of the Ximena family, but even if it was just based on the principle of caution, León would not hand over the title of Earl of Colt to the southern nobles. Wilbert I conferred the title of Viscount Cummings from the north. León handed the city of Colt to an honorary noble from the east. The purpose of the two people is actually very clear, that is, to mix sand among the nobles in the south. Only when the vassals are not harmonious will they fight and argue with each other. When it does not threaten the power of the lord's mediation will be needed at some point, so that León has the opportunity to show his majesty as the lord. What's more, Sir Nabondai, who was canonized as the Earl of Colt by León, was actually a vassal of the third Prince Helson before. After the fall of Helson, this well-known businessman in the eastern part of the kingdom naturally had to find a new backer. So, León and Sir Nabondai have a very pure interest relationship. As a nobleman, León certainly knows that this businessman from the eastern part of the kingdom used to work for Helson. However, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. In order to transform from an honorary nobleman to a real nobleman, Sir Nabondai offered León a condition that he could hardly refuse. First, he promised to give half of the profits from his original industry to the Ximena family without reservation. Secondly, like Greywater Castle, all the military forces of the entire Cold City were handed over to Anatolia for management, becoming the second noble territory in the southern part of the kingdom to outsource city defense. The reason why Selna could offer such conditions was naturally due to his extremely shrewd mind. Honorary nobles and real nobles. Although both are nobles, there is a huge difference between them. You know, honorary titles cannot be inherited by future generations. And people like Leon who directly hold noble titles and bid publicly in the kingdom, although it cannot be said to be a once-in-a-century event, are also extremely rare. Spending some money can become a real noble with hereditary power, giving his family descendants a wealth that can be passed down. At least in Selna's view, no matter from which aspect, he himself is a sure win. Not only did he become a real earl from an honorary viscount, but he also had such a big backer as Anatolia. Even if Helson succeeded in usurping the throne, he might not be able to get such a reward. Of course, not only was Selna very satisfied with this deal, but even Leon, the Marquis of Anatolia, was also very pleased. For the title of Count Cold, the merchants in the kingdom all showed their sincerity. Selna may not be the one who offered the highest price, but he is undoubtedly the most suitable. You know, he is not an ordinary businessman, but a famous grain merchant in the Andal Kingdom. His industry is not only rooted in the eastern part of the kingdom, but also spread throughout the Andal Kingdom. And now, the Ximena family has become half the owner of these industries. Leon is not jealous of the profits that these industries can earn, mainly because these ready-made industries will bring great convenience to the construction of the future intelligence network of Anatolia. Moreover, with the further expansion of the black soil, the future Anatolia will inevitably become one of the largest granaries in the Andal Kingdom. Compared with setting up an industrial chain throughout the kingdom, Selna's loyalty will also bring great convenience to the production and sales of Anatolia's goods. Interests are connected, and each takes what it needs. Although Selna once pledged allegiance to the third Prince Helson, Leon has no doubt that under his next series of combined punches, Selna will definitely become the most loyal running dog of the Ximena family. No one. Chapter 159 Leon issues an order to mobilize the Anatolian armed forces. If you ask, where has the biggest change occurred during the time when Leon took over Anatolia? The answer is not the Thorn territory where the Lord's castle is located. It is the Southwest Highlands, a highland located southwest of the Thorn territory. From nothing to something, from uninhabited to crowded. The huge changes that took place in the Southwest Highlands took only 1 year. It was also in this short period of 1 year that this land, which the Ximena family had never actually controlled before, has become the most important territory of Anatolia. There are not only a large amount of stone here, but also a series of strategically valuable mineral deposits such as warm stone mines and iron mines. In addition, the tall-legged strange bird that originally lived on this land has also become a specialty of Anatolia and has been served on the table of Anatolians. Looking around, the mining town is surrounded by meat drying racks of different shapes but the same purpose. And what is drying on them is naturally the long legs of tall-legged strange birds. The tall-legged bird legs from the Southwest Highlands greatly satisfied the curiosity of the nobles. At least in the south of the kingdom, they have become a must-have dish at the noble banquet. Although it doesn't taste good, it is definitely the center position, and it seems to have become a symbol of noble status. And it's not just the south of the kingdom. As the situation in the Andal Kingdom gradually stabilizes, the trend of placing bird legs at noble banquets has even begun to spread to the entire kingdom. The Anatolians are naturally happy to see this happen, because the long legs of the tall-legged monster bird can be said to be a specialty of Anatolia, which will bring a steady stream of income to this land. Of course, the bird legs that are drying are all from wild tall-legged monster birds, from those tall-legged monster birds that have not yet gotten rid of their vulgar tastes. As for those young birds that have long gotten rid of their vulgar tastes and realized the value of their lives by mining with the Anatolians, they have always enjoyed VIP treatment with food and accommodation. And now the Southwest Highlands obviously have more than just mining and bird farming. After the Anatolian Marquis who returned from the northern expedition inspected the Southwest Highlands a few months ago and gave important instructions to the Anatolian Navy of the 7 warlords of the sea. Salt Lake Town, the second town after the mining town on the Southwest Highlands, has also begun to prosper. The Pink Salt Lake not only provides Anatolia with salt necessary for people's lives, but also provides Anatolia with rare fish ingredients. The gradual formation of various industries has brought human noise to the originally desolate Southwest Highlands, and a series of shops and workshops have gradually emerged like mushrooms after rain. As the mayor of the mining town and the acting mayor of the Salt Lake town, Bello can say responsibly that the current Southwest Highlands provide Anatolia with more than the average foreign trade income. However, with the arrival of the Laprik Corps, the original tranquility of the Southwest Highlands was finally broken. As the Lord, Leon fulfilled his promise, so the Lapriks naturally had to fulfill their obligations as the advance corps to explore the abandoned land. They were stationed in advance at the Baragori Pass leading to the abandoned land, waiting for Leon's order to march. The sound of soldiers training day and night echoed in the empty highlands. And this also moved the settlers living in the Southwest Highlands. Today, as the news that the shadow manipulator can dispel the black fog spreads in the land of Anatolia, Leon no longer needs to hide his exploration plan for the abandoned land. Moreover, even if Leon doesn't say it, the Antolians are not fools. Just a glance at the Laprik soldiers stationed around the Baragori Pass from a distance can roughly realize the ambition of the young lord. However, compared with other noble territories, the Antolians living in this land will not panic about the possible conflicts and challenges. On the contrary, they have only an indescribable excitement in their hearts. The Antolians have never been afraid of hardships, and it was the same in the past and it is the same now. They can remain calm when facing the plateau hounds, and naturally believe that the Ximena family can incorporate the abandoned land into their territory. And most importantly, the successful development of the Southwest Highlands has made them realize the benefits of being the first pioneers. They can build their own houses when the land price is zero, and they can find more job opportunities on a brand new land. So, in fact, it was not only the soldiers of the Laprik Legion who came to the Southwest Highlands in advance. There were also ordinary people who wanted to follow the soldiers and fight for a future for themselves in the abandoned land south of the mountains. Even the people who had already started a family and a career in the Southwest Highlands began to consider whether to write to their relatives and friends to remind them not to miss this precious opportunity. Winter is long, but also short. When the first green finally appeared on the land of Anatolia, Andrew, the commander of the Laprik Legion, finally couldn't hold back his excitement and stood in front of the soldiers. Warriors of the Laprik tribe. Looking at the thousands of Laprik warriors standing tall in front of him, Andrew, the Legion commander, said in a deep voice, "As long as you pass through the mountain pass in front of you, what will appear before your eyes is the former homeland of the Laprik people. Thousands of years ago, driven by the black fog, the ancestors of the Laprik tribe left their homes and finally found a foothold in the north of the mountains. And now, thousands of years later, the great Marquess of Anatolia has found a way to disperse the black fog. It has become possible for the Laprik people to return to their homeland." After the words fell, Andrew took a roll of brown paper from the hand of the guard beside him. He unfolded it very seriously and shouted to the soldiers standing in front of him, "Just yesterday, León Ximena, the Marquess of Anatolia, issued a mobilization order to all Anatolia armed forces. And we, the warriors of the Laprik tribe, are the first soldiers to set foot on that land. This is the opportunity that the High Priest has fought for us, and it is also a gift from the Marquess to the Laprik tribe. The craftsmen of Anatolia will travel with us, using those creations called shadow manipulators to disperse the black fog blocking the way for the warriors of Anatolia in the south of the mountains." After that, he raised a roll of croft paper with Leon's orders written on it above his head. Under the sunlight, the old roll of croft paper seemed to be shining with golden light, symbolizing the expectations of the Laprik people for the future. No more today. Chapter 160, Dig in a remote abandoned land. At noon, the black fog that permeates the edge of the abandoned land will retreat under the scorching sun. This has become a key time node for the Antolians to deploy the shadow manipulator. Although the shadow manipulator has proven its effectiveness at the foot of the mountains in Anatolia, in the final analysis, compared with a black fog that has accumulated in the abandoned land for many years, the black fog that spreads to Anatolia is only a small part after all, and it cannot fully prove the effectiveness of the shadow manipulator. Therefore, before the official opening of the wasteland, the craftsmen of Anatolia need to follow the red smelly grass collection team that has previously traveled through the Baragori Valley and deploy the shadow manipulator in advance to the south of the mountains. Fortunately, after practical testing, the effectiveness of the shadow manipulator does not seem to be affected by the concentration of the black fog. Even after sunset, The black fog within a 5-kilometer radius centered on the shadow manipulator will disappear. So, when the warriors of the Laprik tribe, wearing shiny armor and arranged in neat battle formations, passed through the narrow Baragori Valley, what appeared before their eyes was a scene that shocked them. As the earliest Antolian army stationed in the southwestern highlands to prepare for war, the soldiers of the Laprik Legion had never seen the shadow manipulator in action. And their knowledge of this creation came from the oral descriptions of other colleagues or superiors. Therefore, when they passed through the narrow valley and set foot on this land south of the mountains for the first time, what appeared before their eyes were dozens of gray-black wind columns that reached straight into the sky. With the shadow manipulators as the center, the terrifying black fog swirled and gathered around the shadow manipulators, like huge marble pillars, supporting a barrier to block the black fog for these humans who set foot on the abandoned land. At the same time, the craftsmen from Anatolia were busy around the shadow manipulators, seemingly carrying some elastic solids that swayed back and forth. However, shocked as they were, the soldiers of the Laprik Legion immediately formed a battle formation. The experts in charge of reconnaissance also dispersed to the surroundings as soon as they passed through the Baragori Pass in the valley. The reason was simple. After all, this was the first time that the Antolians had set foot on the land on the other side of the mountains in an organized and large-scale manner after the magic potion collection team. No one knew what was on this land, and no one knew what would appear in front of them after the black fog dissipated. Indeed, as early as last autumn, many people had already set foot here several times to collect red smelly grass. But that was just to pick red smelly grass after all. Even the range of activities was limited to a range of 100 or 200 meters around the pass. But now, dozens of shadow manipulators have supported the Antolians with a range of activities of more than 20 kilometers. Exclamation mark. Apart from anything else, don't the Highland hounds that invade Antolia every year of the jackdaw live in this land south of the mountains? Of course, to be fair, if the shadow manipulator is arranged according to the maximum range that can be covered, then the range that can be covered will obviously not be only 20 kilometers. But the problem is, the Antolians need to have enough tolerance. The abandoned land is different from the land north of the mountains. It is covered by black fog all year round. The people responsible for arranging the shadow manipulator must take into account all possible unexpected situations. After all, no matter whether it is the Laprik warriors or the Antolian militia, in Leon's eyes, they are the most valuable wealth of Antolia and the military support for the Ximena family to gain a foothold. If a shadow manipulator stops working halfway, causing the soldiers to be blinded by the black fog coming from all directions and bewildering their minds, then not to mention the current losses, I am afraid that the future development of the abandoned land will also be delayed. Among the countless young and strong Laprik warriors, an old and even somewhat hunched figure was particularly eye-catching. As an old priest, Fast didn't have to come. But he still made a request to Leon and became the military mage of the Laprik Legion. For no other reason, just to see what this land south of the mountains, this land shrouded in black fog for nearly 1,000 years, looks like. How to say? Although this is his first time here, Fast still has a very wonderful feeling in his heart. Yes, this is indeed the homeland of the Laprik people. But everything in front of him is extremely unfamiliar to him. To the west of the mountain pass, a large area of dense red smelly grass adorns this flat field with a striking bright red. Although the expedition team from Antolia once recorded the pungent stench of the red odor grass on craft paper, only when you really set foot here can you understand how disgusting the Antolians at that time were enduring the nauseating smell and bringing the red odor grass to the other side of the valley. And farther away, countless fluorescent grasses swayed in the wind. Their fruits emitted a soft and warm white light, swaying gently in the breeze. The mountains to the north and south seemed like two different worlds. Just as Fast was amazed by everything that appeared before his eyes, the scattered scouts brought Andrew information from dozens of kilometers away. There is a tree to the west. 1. Andrew frowned, keenly aware of the unusualness of this quantifier. Yes. The scout who hurried back nodded affirmatively. It's in the wilderness to the west. We have never seen such a tall tree. I'm afraid it's as high as 34 meters, and the withered canopy almost covers hundreds of square meters of land. Just the trunk at the bottom needs dozens of people to hug it to measure it. After a moment of silence, Andrew finally asked, "Can it be dug out?" He has always known that his lord is full of curiosity about everything in the abandoned land. Moreover, Since the moon mushroom trees in Anatolia can become moonlight velvet sold to all parts of the kingdom in Leon's hands, then his young lord may not be able to find similar value in other trees. It's too big, the scout said with some embarrassment. But, around that giant tree, there are 2 or 3 saplings of the same species. Then dig the saplings back to the Marcus. Hearing this, Andrew said without hesitation. Transition, a new race will appear in the next chapter. Chapter 161 Who Dug Up the World Tree? Exclamation mark. The diffuse black fog seemed to be filled with a breath of death. Depressing, withered, and lifeless. For ordinary people, let alone walking into the black fog, even if they just approached it, their minds would be affected by it and become extremely manic. However, at this moment, in the dim wasteland, a team was moving slowly in the diffuse black fog. Every figure in the team held up the torch in their hands and walked silently in the black fog. Alt Shovel walked at the front of the team. Silver long hair, deep purple eyes. The huge light blue leaves made up a simple outfit, and the skin all over his body revealed a very obvious paleness. On both sides of his slightly restless face, a pair of pointed ears kept shaking as he walked, as if they could find the direction for him to move forward in the diffuse black fog. Obviously, Alt Shovel was not a human. He was an elf. The blazing flames kept swaying on the torch in his hand. However, unlike ordinary flames, the flames in Alt's hand seemed to be able to dispel the shadows around him, forming a barrier around him to block the black fog. The elves called it the eternal fire. The burning flames can bring a little warmth in the cold winter, and can bring a light that never goes out in the depressing night. And most importantly, these flames seem to never go out. Not only can they dispel the black fog, but also prevent the elves living on this land from gradually dying out in this land full of death. You know, among the torches held by the elves at this moment, there is only one fire seed, which comes from the eternal fire enshrined in the camp of the Moon Elf tribe. Whenever an elf team goes out, the elders of the Moon Elves will take out a fire seed from the burning eternal fire to dispel the obstacles in front of the elves who are traveling far away. As a race that has lived on this land for thousands of years, even though they have a lifespan much longer than that of humans, the elves today, including Elt, have long forgotten the scene before the black fog filled the air. Ever since Elt was born in this world, the camp has been surrounded by black fog. Fortunately, even though the black fog is pervasive, the Moon Elves' world tree still provides them with a vast green shade, making the camp full of vitality. Under the protection of the world tree and the eternal fire, the Moon Elves can eat berries and drink the juice of green vines. Even though the outside world is filled with endless black fog, they can still live safely in their own little world. However, at this moment, Elt's face is not good, and even full of worry. Because just a few months ago, the peaceful life of the Moon Elves in these hundreds of years was finally broken. And the culprit who broke all this was naturally the black fog that permeated the abandoned land. You know, even Leon in Anatolia can feel the movement from the abandoned land. After all, if it weren't for the black fog that had already spread to Anatolia, Leon wouldn't have to rush to get the shadow manipulator. Since even Anatolia was deeply troubled by it, the elves living in the abandoned land were naturally even more so. As the black fog permeating this land became thicker and thicker, even with the blessing of the eternal fire and the world tree, the range of activities of the Moon Elves was constantly compressed. Even the leaves of the originally lush world tree showed a little yellow during this period of time. And this. Obviously, it is not just as simple as compressing the range of activities. The compression of the range of activities means that the berries available for the elves to pick are also decreasing. At any time, for any race, being hungry is not a trivial matter. After all, even the sturdy orcs can kneel down and surrender under the temptation of free food and accommodation. In order to solve this problem, the Moon Elves had to think of various ways. For example, pray to the god of nature, and then plant the seedlings of the world tree on the periphery of the habitat. The purpose of Elt's trip was to use the precious water of the moon spring to irrigate the seedlings of the world tree planted on the periphery, so that those fragile seedlings would be revitalized under the cover of the black fog. I hope those saplings are still alive. Thinking of this, Elt couldn't help but sigh. The Moon Elves planted the seedlings of the world tree in 3 places around the habitat. Unfortunately, he had already been to 2 of them. Either they had dried up under the invasion of the black fog, or they were damaged and broken by the monsters wandering in this land. They must be alive. Hearing Elt's slightly worried words, the elf girl walking behind forced a smile on her face that was uglier than crying. I hope so, Angelica. Elt replied helplessly. However, when they followed the guidance of the god of nature and followed the call of the world tree, gradually approaching their destination, Elch suddenly frowned. There is a special bond between the elves and the world tree. So in most cases, even if the world tree has withered, as long as they are within a certain range, they can feel the existence of the world tree in their hearts. But this time, can you feel the presence of those world tree seedlings? Lee turned back with some hesitation. The elves present all widened their eyes, shook their heads in panic, and revealed an expression of disbelief in their eyes. After a brief fascination, even the gentle elves couldn't help but swear, TMD, who dug up the seedlings I planted? Although the black fog was lingering in front of Leet, the bond between him and the world tree made the elves aware of the reality that was happening not far away. It was at this moment that the elves present couldn't help but speed up their pace, and even held the longbows behind them tightly in their hands. Even though they had lived in the abandoned land for thousands of years, this was the first time they couldn't feel the presence of the world tree seedlings. The plateau hound wouldn't be so bored that it would take away the world tree seedlings, right? Exclamation mark. No, this is not the range of the plateau hound. Just as the elves were full of doubts, holding their torches high, and running towards the world tree. Puff. With a slight sound, the elf seemed to have suddenly stepped over an invisible barrier, and the surrounding black fog suddenly dissipated. In the next second, everything around Elf became extremely clear. Elf rubbed his eyes involuntarily. Here. It seems that there is no black fog anymore? Chapter 162, First Contact with the Elves. Elf's shovel step slowly stopped. He stood there blankly, looking around. Over the years, he had long been accustomed to the black fog blocking the way ahead when he went out, and he had long been accustomed to holding a burning torch and walking alone in this depressing land. Without a doubt, this was the first time he saw a piece of land that was not covered by a black fog when he went out. Elf rubbed his eyes. He remembered clearly that just a few months ago, when the seedlings of the world tree were planted on this land, it was definitely not like this. Then, as if he had finally made up his mind, after a moment of hesitation, he threw the torch in his hand on the ground not far away. Elt. At this moment, the elf standing behind him couldn't help but widen their eyes. The fire of the eternal fire is the life-saving talisman of every elf when they go out, which can dispel the black fog within a radius of dozens of meters around them. However, although the black fog seemed to have disappeared in front of them, no one could be sure whether this was some kind of illusion produced by the abandoned land. After all, there were all kinds of strange plants growing on this land. Elf knew that there were 7 plants that could produce illusions in front of the elves. Therefore, no one could be sure whether they had accidentally entered the illusion on the way here. Fortunately, he made the right bet. As an elf hunter who has been away from home for many years, Elf, who is skilled and courageous, firmly believed that he was not affected by any external factors at this moment. His consciousness was clear, and his mind did not have the numb feeling that he had when he was shrouded in illusions. And the reality did verify Elf's conjecture. After throwing away the torch, he was not disturbed by the black fog that was surging around him. So, there was indeed no black fog here, and it was not an illusion presented in front of them. The black fog has dissipated. After a long silence, Elf's voice was trembling. It was not until this moment that Elf's heart finally relaxed. The horror of the black fog is not only that it can affect the minds of any living being, but also that of the gray shadows wandering in the black fog and the sounds coming from the unknown distance. That is why, although they were just walking in the black fog, the strings in the minds of all the elves were always in a tense state during the journey. Because they didn't know when a monster would suddenly rush out of the black fog beside them, and they didn't know what kind of threat would exist in the gray front. So, the abandoned land without black fog looks like this. Although there was no oppressive haziness in the camp of the moon elves, this was the first time they looked at the abandoned land in the countryside far away from the camp. Looking around, patches of fluorescent grass swayed in the breeze, and not far away, the saplings planted by the elves before were no longer there, leaving only a few large deep pits, which made the elves present fall into contemplation. Obviously, the world tree was dug away. There were even traces of tools around the pits. A race that has never had any contact with the elves before. Elf quickly made a judgment. This was not only because of the traces around the pit, but also because of the strange instruments that were guiding and gathering the black fog. Elf, the race you are talking about, is probably human. Just as Elt was about to continue his reasoning, Angelica's slightly trembling voice came from behind him. Human. Elt murmured to himself, it's unlikely. There have been no traces of humans on this land hundreds of years ago. I suspect that those mentally retarded skeletons wandering in the abandoned land may be. Elt. Angelica's voice seemed to be about to cry, look over there. Hearing this, Elt finally realized that something was wrong and looked in the direction Angelica pointed. Then, he saw an army. An army that he had never seen in the abandoned land, a mighty army. They wore armor that shone with cold light, held sharp weapons in their hands, and held high hard shields. In the army formation, a double-headed eagle flag with a red background and yellow stripes was fluttering in the wind. At this moment, the scene before the elves gradually overlapped with the appearance of humans described by the moon elf elders. Human. Elt's eyes gradually became solemn. For any race living in the abandoned land, life in the abandoned land is difficult and boring. The elders of the moon elves have sat on the side of the eternal fire more than once to tell the young elves about the history of this land. For example, humans, the race that has long disappeared from this land, were the rulers of the abandoned land thousands of years ago, and are also one of the few races with a body shape similar to that of the elves. They have a symmetrical figure second only to the elves, wisdom second only to the elves, and many characteristics second only to the elves. It is precisely because of this series of successes that even though they once established a huge country on this land, when the black fog was pervasive, the elves were still alive, and the humans had disappeared. But what did he see today? Exclamation mark. Humans are back again? Exclamation mark. This race, second only to the elves, not only did not perish in the long river of history, but also opened up a piece of pure land without black houses in this land shrouded by black fog. Exclamation mark. Elt couldn't understand it. Just like Andrew at this moment, it was hard to understand the intruders with slender ears not far away. When the scouts of the Lapric Legion brought him this news, Andrew was extremely shocked. Although he had already made sufficient psychological preparations for the possibility of other creatures in the abandoned land, the problem was, he had never thought that there would be intelligent creatures here. You know, the Antorians were able to set foot on this land with the help of the Shadow Manipulator. But just now, what did he see? Those creatures, whose appearance was very similar to the legendary elves, just held up torches. They broke into this land that was hard-earned by the Antorians? Would those guys be affected by the black fog? Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Andrew felt like he was facing a great enemy. They were not even afraid of the black fog, and there was no telling what kind of strength they would burst out. Prepare to meet the enemy. Andrew did not dare to let down his guard because of the opponent's numerical disadvantage, and gave the order at the first moment. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, First Contact with the Elves. Antolia, Thorn Territory. Leon was in his study, observing the sapling planted in the flower pot. According to Andrew, the commander of the Lapric Legion, this seemingly fragile sapling will not only be tens of meters tall when it grows up, but also have a trunk that nearly 10 people can hug. If it weren't for the inconvenience of transportation, Andrew would even want to send the huge ancient tree to the Thorn Territory in one piece. But just now, when Leon cut off a branch of the sapling and then stuffed it into the scientific instrument, this ancient creation that brought Leon great convenience provided him with more accurate information. To be precise, this is not an ordinary sapling, but a sapling of the world tree. And the height after it really enters adulthood is definitely not only 30 or 40 meters. At least in the era when the ancestors still existed, as the treasure of the elves, an adult world tree is enough to grow to hundreds of meters high. Elves. This is actually not the first time Leon has heard the name of elves. Long before the time travel, elves were the standard race in all major online articles after traveling through the fantasy world. And in this fantasy world full of magical power, elves are indeed frequent guests in the poems of wandering poets. For example, Johnny's most famous work Dozens of Days and Nights that the paladin and the elf queen have to say, and 2 or 3 things between me and the elf girl and so on. Legends related to elves have always been widely circulated in human society and are talked about with relish. But This is the first time that Leon feels that he is so close to the elves. Especially when the 300-mile express from the abandoned land was presented to Leon's desk by the waiter. After the world tree, Andrew actually found traces of elves in the abandoned land. However, unlike the humans who have long disappeared in the abandoned land, the elves have been living on that lifeless land during this period of black fog. According to Andrew's letter, the elves seem to have a unique fire that could dispel the black fog, allowing them to live in the shade of the world tree for thousands of years in that sparsely populated land. And in the 300 miles of urgent work from the abandoned land, Andrew also admitted his mistakes very frankly. As the commander of the Lapric Legion, he was cautious and failed to pack a few elves for his lord to send to the Thorn territory. This was obviously the sequelae left by his previous collection of refugees. In Andrew's description, those cowardly elves who broke into the Black Fog purification area rushed into the Black Fog without looking back as soon as they saw the Antolian army, so that the two sides only met and could not have a deeper and frank communication in spirit or physics. But this is not bad news. Before this, Leon had never considered how to get along with the elves. After all, the style of painting in this world, or the style of painting in Antolia, has always been a bit weird. It's not the chubby grum, or the tall-legged strange bird with a long head and thighs. So much so that Leon once thought that the so-called elves had long disappeared in the long river of history, like their ancestors. So, when he realized that the elves still existed, Leon called his think tank at the first time. To be honest, although Leon is now a Marcus, whether it is a commoner or a businessman, whether it is a small noble or a great noble, the moment they see him, they all call him His Excellency León Ximena, the Marquis of Antolia, but Leon's think tank is somewhat shabby. At present, there is only one member, Aaron, the butler of Antolia. However, after a while, Bello, the mayor of the mining town and the acting mayor of the Salt Lake town, may also be awarded the title of honorary member of the think tank by Leon, which will double the expansion of the Ximena family's think tank. Elves. After carefully reading the information from the abandoned land several times, even the knowledgeable old butler Aaron couldn't help but fall into deep thought. There is no way. For ordinary people in this world, believing that the elves are still alive is actually as difficult as believing that, I am Ken Shihong, please V me 50. However, as a soldier of Antolia, Andrew, who is still arranging work in the abandoned land, saw the living elves with his own eyes. This is the fact. So, both Aaron and Leon must face a choice. That is, what attitude should be taken to treat this race that has lived in the abandoned land for at least 1,000 years? Active? Or passive response? Or direct physical communication? This decision is actually not easy to make. Because neither Aaron nor Leon knew what the attitude of the elves was towards humans at this time. And according to the records in the ancient archives, the relationship between elves and humans has always been relatively cold. Even thousands of years ago, in order to decide the boss of the abandoned land, the ancestors once fought several wars with the elves. What's more, Antolia had just met the elves and directly dug up the world tree planted by them. This beginning is obviously not too harmonious. But Leon would not blame Andrew for this. Because if conditions permit, bringing back something from the abandoned land is one of the orders Leon gave to Andrew. The key right now is to find out the power of the elves. After a long silence, Aaron finally spoke. If the elves today are still as powerful as they were in the time of our ancestors, and even built their own empire in the abandoned land, then the only thing we can do now is to return the world tree sapling. What's more, according to Andrew's description, the elves should not have mastered the machine that can dispel the black fog, and can only rely on the special flames in their hands to clear the obstruction of the black fog. So, we are not without cards in our hands. As for the second possibility, if those elves living in the abandoned land are just lingering on that land, then Antoria naturally doesn't have to worry. No one can challenge the authority of the Ximena family in front of the Antorian soldiers. Leon nodded and said, "Which possibility do you think is the greatest?" "The second one." Aaron answered firmly, "If the elves really established their own country on that land, then I'm afraid they would have passed through the Baragori Pass and appeared in front of the Antorians. But they didn't. This means that the only thing they can do is to protect their own safety, and they have no intention of exploring that vast land." Hearing this, Leon nodded with satisfaction. "It's what I thought. Send a message to Andrew. The development plan of the abandoned land will proceed as usual. A new batch of shadow manipulators will be delivered in half a month. By then, the Antolian mercenaries will lend them a hand. As soon as the voice fell, Leon seemed to have thought of something, and then added, since there are traces of elves in the abandoned land, there may be other races. If there is any special situation, be sure to guard the Baragori Pass. From now on, that is the southern gate of Anatolia. I was so busy some time ago that I just realized that the promised map has not been updated when I read the comments. I will get it out as soon as possible. I hope everyone will forgive me. Chapter 164, A Simple Shadow Monster Trap. Out of caution, Leon planned to build a pass at the Baragori Pass. Because even at the widest part of the valley, its width is only a few hundred meters, which is the best choice for building a pass. Even if the power of the elves is really as Aaron analyzed, it has been continuously weakened in the past thousands of years, but Leon has always been extremely vigilant about the land located south of the mountains. At present, it is the elves who have emerged. But as the footsteps of the Antorians gradually go deeper into the abandoned land, it is not certain that other new races will be discovered in the future. Orcs, monsters, and even giant dragons. Leon has always liked to plan ahead. First, build the pass at the Baragori Pass, and the people living in Antoria will have a better sense of security. The refugees that Antoria has just collected from all over the kingdom can also provide more job opportunities. After all, the construction of a new city alone cannot satisfy the energy of the Antorians. Let alone 996, even if it is 007, the people of Anatolia will not necessarily complain. The Lord has already given the people a job, do they still want to rest? So, after a careful analysis, when Leon realized that the power of the elves would not be too exaggerated, the topic between him and Aaron began to gradually deviate and circled back to the internal affairs of Anatolia. However, for the internal affairs of Anatolia, except for major events that need to be decided by Leon himself, Leon basically adopts the monarch offline system. It's not that he wants to be lazy, but on weekdays, he has to study ancient magic and plan the future of the family. Where can he have so much time and energy to deal with those daily trivialities? As long as the army of Anatolia is firmly in his hands, the stability of Anatolia will not be a problem. So, after hastily discussing the internal affairs, Leon summoned the only great wizard in Anatolia, Mr. Albert, according to his established plan. Instead of staying in the study to consider the unclear attitude of the elves, Leon actually wanted to further explore the path of ancient magic. This is not just a pursuit of magical power, but also a guarantee for further development of his own golden fingers. For example, with the successful completion of the Shadow Manipulator, Leon set himself a phased goal, which is to quickly tinker with a shadow monster trap. There is no way the shadow monsters in the ancient archives were gone when the riot occurred. This also led to the fact that during this half-year period, Leon could only capture shadow monsters in his spare time to dispel the black fog in the ancient archives. Although the Shadow Manipulator is very useful, the problem is, Leon can only take things out of the ancient archives, but can't bring things outside the ancient archives in. As for why the staff and sword used by Leon to suppress the shadow monster riot were brought in, Leon said he didn't know. So, he could only settle for the next best thing. Consider whether other methods can be used, that is, to capture shadow monsters at a faster speed to promote the speed of dissipation of the black fog in the archives. The appearance of nightmare fuel gave Leon such an opportunity. Shadow monsters feed on black fog, and nightmare fuel is the final product formed after the black fog condenses. Leon naturally thought, can nightmare fuel be used as bait to attract shadow monsters? The answer is yes. Due to the existence of shadow monsters themselves, those stupid shadow monsters can't eat nightmare fuel at all, but nightmare fuel is condensed by black fog after all. So, even if they can't eat it, as a single-threaded shadow creature, shadow monsters will inevitably be attracted by nightmare fuel before they can verify it personally. This is not Leon's imagination, but the conclusion Leon came to after observing these days. Although ordinary people cannot see the existence of shadow monsters, any wizard who can feel the existence of magical power can clearly see the shadow monsters wandering in the world as long as his spiritual power is reduced to a certain level. It is precisely because of this that the migration route of shadow monsters has changed significantly since Leon handed over nightmare fuel to the craftsmen of Anatolia for research. In the past, shadow monsters from all over the kingdom floated in a straight line. According to the principle that the straight line between 2 points is the shortest, they floated directly to the abandoned land. But now, how to say it? The migration route of any shadow monster passing through Anatolia can't help but become obscure. Sometimes it floats to the left, sometimes it floats to the right. Anyway, it must float around the nightmare fuel for a while. This also led to the craftsman workshop responsible for researching nightmare fuel becoming the place where the most shadow monsters gathered in Antolia. I don't know what kind of state of mind those diligent craftsmen would have if they realized one day that there were batches of ghosts in front and behind them, and even within a radius of hundreds of meters. So, it is imperative to build a simple shadow monster trapping device. This is not only to dispel the black fog in the ancient archives, but also for the construction of enchantment materials. Only when Leon has enough shadow monsters can these shadow monsters produce their own ecological reaction, so that higher level shadow monsters will be born in the process of eating each other, and they can drop more enchanting materials after being killed. Leon has a deep understanding of the sharpness of enchanted weapons. It is not difficult for him to imagine what kind of fear the enemies of Antolia will have in their hearts if the soldiers of Antolia each have a shadow knife. It is precisely for this reason that in order to build the army of Antolia into a formidable elite division, the first time he saw Albert, Leon said straight to the point, "I need shadow monsters. A sufficient number of shadow monsters." Anyway, Albert is his teacher first, and then the great wizard of the Ximena family. It is normal for students to make some requests to their teachers, right? The gathering of shadow monsters will lead to the birth of high-level shadow monsters, and the birth of high-level shadow monsters will draw precious enchanting materials. Facing Albert with a question mark on his face, Leon took the initiative to explain. "I need time to study magic," Albert said unhappily. Although employed by the Ximena family, the relationship between the archmage and the nobles is by no means a direct vassal relationship. Albert obviously has the right to refuse Leon's request. As long as the shadow monster trap can be built, the Antolia Magic Academy that I promised before will start construction. Albert. Dean. Leon's words seemed to contain endless temptations, which made Albert, who had a resolute face, tremble all over. "Deal with him." He gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "Wow, I forgot to save the outline I wrote yesterday. I was confused when I opened it today." Chapter 165, The Elves Feel the Human Shock. Elt was panicking. Not only him, but the elves with him were also panicking. Especially when those fully armed soldiers raised their spears and started moving towards them. Not to mention that they were slightly outnumbered. Just a momentum that could only be honed by long-time battle formations was not comparable to the elves who went out to plant trees. I'm afraid only the elf longbowmen of the elf clan, or the elf guards who guarded the world tree and the eternal fire, could compete with them. So, Elt made the decision to run away almost in an instant. He didn't even look back. After running for several kilometers, the group of elves stopped panting. "Humans can dispel the black fog," Angelica said absent-mindedly. "They can actually dispel the black fog. Even the elves living on this land have a deep fear of the black fog that spreads around them. Yes, the eternal fire can indeed dispel the black fog. But the depressing and restless atmosphere could not be easily erased no matter what. Not only could they not do it, but even the most elite elven longbowmen of the elves could not do it. Speed up. We must take this news back immediately." After finally calming down his emotions, Elt Shovel finally said. The elves present nodded in agreement. However, no matter how calmed down their emotions, the previous scene had already been deeply imprinted in the minds of the elves. Those strange-shaped instruments, those elite soldiers, and those wind columns formed by the black fog that connected the sky. The elves could not understand the previous scene at all. But what they knew was that the pattern of the abandoned land would probably change dramatically soon. Half a day later, the black fog in front of them gradually became thinner. The tall trees gradually penetrated the cover of the black fog and appeared in front of the elves. And not far away, the shadow of the world tree finally came into Elt's eyes. That was the world tree of the moon elves. An ancient tree that was hundreds of meters tall and had grown on this land for nearly 10,000 years. Elt could not help but slow down his pace. In order to resist the monsters that would occasionally emerge from the black fog and the plateau hounds that invaded the camp, the elves' camp was surrounded by walls made of thorns and vines. Even the elves who went out had to carefully identify the road ahead to avoid being hurt by the traps set by their own people. Finally, after the group carefully passed the warning area full of traps and man-eating plants, the gate of the camp was slowly opened. Before the black fog spread, the elves did not have the habit of building camps. They took the mountains and forests as their homes and the green shade as their blankets. The vast forests spread across this land are all the homes of the elves. However, as the black fog spread, large areas of mountains and forests gradually withered, and large areas of green gradually turned yellow. Only around the world tree, which symbolizes nature and vitality, is there space for trees to grow in a thin green shade. Over the years, the existence of the eternal fire allowed the elves to travel through the black fog, and the vitality brought by the world tree allowed the elves to obtain a source of food. So, when Elt stepped into the camp, the elves who had been waiting behind the gate surrounded him. How is the seedling of the world tree? In fact, before this, the elves had wanted to plant more world trees countless times to make this land full of vitality again. However, even though adult world trees can resist the invasion of the black fog, it is difficult for the seedlings of world trees to do so. It is precisely for this reason that although the elves have tried to plant world trees many times, it is extremely lucky if 1 out of 10 seedlings can survive. However, in the face of the elves' questions, Elt said nothing. Not only him, but the elves who were traveling with Elt also kept silent. I want to see the elder, Elt said without hesitation. As an elder of the Moon Elves, Claymanty just celebrated his 144th birthday 7 days ago. On that day, the elf queen Alicia presented him with a basket of freshly picked berries. Those berries came from a cluster of berries closest to the world tree. It is said that only berries picked from the berry bush closest to the world tree can taste the flavor of berries before the black fog spread. This is indeed the case. Even as an elder of the Moon Elves, Claymanty rarely tastes fruits that are so juicy. If it weren't for the fact that the situation facing the elves is deteriorating at a visible rate, Claymanty would be very happy. Ordinary elves like Elt only know that the spread of the black fog will have an impact. But as an elder of the Moon Elves, Claymanty knows the biggest threat facing the Moon Elves now. That is, this world tree, which has protected the Moon Elves and lived in the abandoned land filled with black fog for thousands of years, has already shown some signs of decline. Or to put it more directly, it has entered the aging stage. Trees, of course, have a lifespan. Willows usually have a lifespan of more than 100 years, and birches usually have a lifespan of 500 or 600 years. The world tree that can grow to a height of several hundred meters has a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. But that is only under normal circumstances. The black fog is not a normal situation. This tree that has blessed the Moon Elves for thousands of years has already shown some withered and yellow images under the invasion of the black fog. It is for this reason that when planting new world tree seedlings, the elves directly took out their most cherished moon spring water for watering. But, the world tree seedlings were actually dug up by someone? Exclamation mark. This was the first thought that came to Claymanty's mind. But then, he realized a fact that shocked him even more. Humans are back. Humans who have disappeared in the abandoned land for thousands of years have returned to this land filled with black fog. No. To be precise. Or according to Elt and others, humans have even mastered the ability to disperse the black house on a large scale? Exclamation mark. This made him feel unbelievable. So much so that he had to repeatedly confirm with several elves who were out, "Are you really not trapped in an illusion?" I threw the torch in my hand away. Elt could understand the feelings of the elf elder at this time, because he had also experienced such a mental journey. But all he could do was tell the truth. Question: is this book title bad? If the book title is changed, what do you think would be a better change? Chapter 166: The Moon Elf's Decision. Moonshadow Forest. The cool evening breeze brushed through the treetops, causing a rustling sound between the leaves of the ancient trees. The elves claimed to be the guardians of the world tree, so, the residence of the elf queen Alicia was built next to the world tree. It was a wooden house located by the lake. The sparkling lake water rippled outside the window, and the plump berries bloomed with charming colors. This is the place in the entire forest that is least affected by the black fog. According to the elders of the Moon Elves, only the flowers, plants and trees growing here still retain their appearance before the black fog spread. As an ancient race with thousands of years of inheritance, the elves also have a very ancient inheritance system. The elf queen is the actual controller of the Moon Elves, but she is not the strongest among the elves. In fact, the elf queens of all generations were chosen by the god of nature in the ancient ceremony. They can feel the power of nature and hear the call of the world tree. When the elf sprinkled a handful of moon spring water under the world tree and prayed in a pious and solemn state of mind, the world tree would wake up from its slumber and brush its vibrant green shade over the heads of those favored by God. From then on, the queen of the elf had the opportunity to talk directly to the world tree. Claymanty took a deep breath and knocked on the door of the wooden house with a heavy heart. "Come in." As a slightly cold voice came out, Claymanty's chaotic mood also settled a little. It was not just Elt and others who were out planting trees who were caught off guard by the return of humans. Even as an elder of the Moon Elves, Claymanty was not calm after hearing about Elt's experience. The decline of the world tree, the dissipation of the black fog, the return of humans. All kinds of things were intertwined. This made Claymanty suddenly realize that the abandoned land might be about to face a major change that had not happened in thousands of years. He took a deep breath and finally pushed open the door in front of him. Alicia was sitting in the room. Her long silver hair fell like a waterfall, and her clear eyes did not show any ripples because of the people entering. She was using her slender fingers to gently soothe the young rabbit in her arms. "The world tree told me that among the seedlings planted last month, only 2 are still alive." After finally smoothing the snow-white fur of the young rabbit, Alicia finally raised her head and looked at the people standing in front of her. 2. Claymanty was stunned for a moment, and turned back to look at the elves who had just returned. "Probably, maybe the 2 that were dug up." Elt touched his nose and answered a little nervously. "Dig away." Alicia's words finally revealed some doubts, and her cold voice couldn't help but rise a few degrees. Yes, as the queen of the elves, she can indeed talk to the world tree. But the world tree is not the private property of the elves. In a sense, it was the world tree that chose the elves, not the elves who chose the world tree. So for the world tree itself, it was good enough that the seedlings planted could survive. As for whether the surviving seedlings were under the control of the elves, it was actually an irrelevant matter. "What do you mean?" Alicia looked at the young elf standing behind Claymanty in confusion. Elt found traces of humans. Claymanty took the initiative to explain. "Not far east of the Moon Shadow Forest, those humans dug up the world tree we planted not long ago." Humans. At this moment, even Alicia, who is always calm, had a look of surprise on her face. In Alicia's memory, long before she was born, the term human had already become history in the eyes of the elves, and had become a passerby in the abandoned land. "Yes." Elt nodded hesitantly and continued, "We found traces of humans in that land, an elite human army. And the most important thing is, they seem to have mastered the ability to dispel the black fog, and can open up a piece of land that is dozens of kilometers long and not covered by a black fog on the flat plain. This is impossible." Alicia stood up suddenly. Then, the sleeping rabbit in her arms slipped and fell to the ground, jumping to the corner of the room with resentment in his eyes. "Rabbit autism JPG, not to mention that humans have disappeared in the abandoned land for thousands of years. Just the ability you mentioned to dispel the black fog is completely impossible." Alicia tried to calm her voice. "But we all saw it. And the appearance of those people is indeed the same as what the elders of the Moon Elves said." Elt pointed to his teammate standing next to him and said nervously. "There was no way, because humans had disappeared in the abandoned land for many years. The Moon Elves' impression of humans all came from the oral accounts of the Moon Elves' ancestors." So, seeing the Elf Queen's doubts, even though they had seen it with their own eyes, Elt and the others still had a little doubt about the scene they had seen before. Could it be that they had seen it wrong? Or were they really in some kind of fantasy? What do those humans look like? Similar to elves, but their ears are not as pretty as elves, their bodies are not as symmetrical as elves, and their eyes. After a series of inquiries, Alicia finally accepted the facts brought back by Elt and the others. There was no way. Although she had never seen humans, Elt's description seemed to be somewhat similar to humans, or exactly the same. "Should we send the elven longbowmen to take back the seedlings of the world tree?" Claymanty asked tentatively. "Don't act rashly." Alicia frowned, but shook her head after all. Although she really wanted to do this, if what Elt said was true, then the abandoned land in the future would probably undergo an unprecedented change. Even though she was quite upset with the humans who dug up the world tree just after they met, Alicia knew the current situation of the Moon Elves better. Moreover, if the humans really had a way to dispel the black fog, then apart from other things, the most anxious ones should be the undead spirits wandering in the abandoned land, right? Send the elves to verify the accuracy of the news first. If those humans are not hostile, forget it, observe from a distance first, and don't contact them for the time being. Without knowing the details of humans, rash contact would put the Moon Elves, who are already walking on thin ice, in greater danger. Although they have never really come into contact with humans, according to the records left by the ancestors of the elves, humans. I'm afraid they are not easy to deal with. Chapter 167, Antolians Love Farming. Andrew didn't know what the elves were thinking. But according to the news sent by his lord from the rear, the 2 saplings he dug up seemed to be something called the World Tree saplings. I heard that was the treasure of the elves? Andrew felt that he was in trouble, so he woke up. When he goes back to get something in the future, he will first find out the opponent's strength. If he can beat them, he will take them, and if he can't beat them, he will run away. This will also save him from always worrying about the strength of the elves. Fortunately, after careful analysis by the Antolian think tank, Andrew also has a certain understanding of the strength of the elves. How to say it? Anyway, it won't delay the Antolian people from farming. Although in people's stereotypes, the tradition of the Antolian people should be hunting in the wild. But that is actually forced by the situation. It's not that the Antolian people don't want to farm, but that they couldn't farm in the past. Before León came to power, the land of Antolia was extremely barren. There was very little land available for cultivation. Even for those lands that could be cultivated, the annual grain output was terrible. However, with the operation of the land compactor and the improvement of soil properties, the consciousness of farming that had been dormant in the hearts of the Antolians for many years finally awakened again. Therefore, with the arrival of spring, not only the farmlands of Antolia were filled with the figures of the people working on the land, but also the abandoned land south of the mountains. The pass of the Baragori Pass began to be built, and the land compactor began to roar. The abandoned land, which was originally seldom visited by people, finally heard the noise of humans again after thousands of years. As one of the first pioneers to come to the abandoned land, Jervis was particularly excited. The development of the Southwest Highlands has proved to all Antolians that the first people to try something new often get unexpected benefits. Therefore, after the news of going to the abandoned land for development was issued, there were naturally many people who responded. Of course, the requirement is still the same, and those with Antolian household registration are given priority. It is not necessary to visit every household to register the people. Although such a method can maximize the effective implementation of the household registration plan, it is undoubtedly unrealistic in Antolia, where administrative staff are extremely short. There is no surveillance and no fingerprints in this era. If someone really doesn't want to register, then León actually has no better way. Therefore, León's implementation method is very simple. If you want to find a job and want to farm and open up wasteland, you must register your identity information. And under similar conditions, give priority to the people who registered earlier. Jervis is very glad that he took the initiative to fill in the population information as soon as León decided to register, otherwise he might not be able to become the first Antolian to come to the abandoned land. Yes, as the first batch of pioneers, coming to the abandoned land does face great risks and challenges. But what the people are most worried about is not the risk, but the lack of the opportunity to support their families. This era is cruel. Under the feudal fiefdom system, the vast majority of the population were just serfs attached to the local lords. Antolia was able to give these people the opportunity to achieve class transition, and they were naturally grateful. What's more, what is risk-free? The Antolians are never afraid of difficulties. The perseverance in their bones has allowed them to survive the year of the jackdaw again and again. And even if there is no threat from the plateau hounds, the coming-of-age ceremony for Antolian teenagers is to go hunting alone in the mountains and forests. This is the tradition of Antolia. Of course there will be risks, and there may be casualties, but this is precisely the guarantee that the Antolians can fight well. Therefore, when the city of Thorn Territory just posted a notice to recruit the first batch of pioneers, Jervis took the lead and reported his name. He was full of curiosity about everything in the abandoned land. And this is probably the only town in Antolia that is brightly lit even in the middle of the night. Because as the black fog was gradually dissipated, more and more fluorescent grass appeared in front of everyone. Who says that lighting must have electricity? Fluorescent grass that can emit light at night is not only environmentally friendly, but also environmentally friendly. In addition, this plant that grows in abandoned lands has extremely strong vitality and can grow extremely vigorously with almost no care, so it naturally becomes a substitute for candles. Although the current pass has just begun to be built, no one will doubt that this land has all the conditions for building a giant city. Especially when a new batch of shadow manipulators were transported here by the mercenaries of Antolia, the range of activities of the Antolians suddenly doubled. While the area of arable land has also expanded in the same proportion, more and more unique biological communities growing on this land have also appeared in front of the Antillians. Monkey tail grass with curly furry leaves, stone fruit bushes that can grow wild fruits as hard as stone, and even honey thorns that secrete sticky liquid. Jervis had never seen these strange creations before. However, while farming, like most of the Antillians, Jervis was more concerned about the skeletons that occasionally popped out of the black fog at the edge. Leon's guess was not wrong. After discovering the traces of the elves, the Antillians finally realized that there was another creature on this land, the skeleton. Empty eye sockets, white ribs. Jervis clearly remembered that when the first skeleton broke into the newly reclaimed farmland, people looked panicked as if they were facing a great enemy. Almost all the Antillian soldiers stationed on this land took up a fighting posture at the same time. However, those skeletons did not seem to have their own consciousness, and had no interest in attacking these outsiders who appeared in front of them. They just wandered aimlessly on this land, like lost travelers, shuttling back and forth between farmlands. Some returned to the black fog after a brief stagnation. Some of them stayed and wandered in the farmland until the remaining black mist on them was gradually stripped away by the operation of the shadow manipulator, and then they fell straight to the ground, leaving only broken and rotten bones. Gradually, people were no longer afraid. If a skeleton accidentally stepped on the crops that had just been planted, it would be kicked by the brave farmers. But even so, for safety reasons, every time the night fell, the pioneers who arrived at the abandoned land had to retreat to the Baragori Valley at the request of the Antillian soldiers. And Andrew reported everything that happened here truthfully, and quietly waited for orders from the Thorn territory. Chapter 168, The Antillians are trying a new way of farming. March 12th is a good day to travel. Under the protection of the Antillian mercenaries, the great Antillian Marcus León Ximena finally arrived at this land located south of the mountains. Even though the red smelly grass from the abandoned land feeds the entire Antillian potion production workshop, and even though the fluorescent grass from the abandoned land illuminates the night of Antillian, but this is Leon's first time here. Mr. Marcus. Andrew knelt on one knee, expressing his infinite loyalty to the Lord who came from afar. Get up. Leon waved his hand, and his eyes curiously swept over the pass under construction in front of him. The cliffs on both sides are hundreds of meters high. In the narrow Baragori Pass, the continuous mountains in the south of Anatolia seem to have been split open by an axe, allowing the north and south of the mountains to be connected. The stones for building the city wall were all taken from the mines located in the southwest highlands. Since Leon has no plan to build a wall in the new city on the west bank of the White Blade River, when the order to build a pass was issued, the people of Anatolia took action at the first time. As Leon said before, this is the southern gate of Anatolia. Especially when the news from the abandoned land was placed on Leon's desk one by one, building a pass at the Baragori Pass has become a top priority in Leon's eyes. The reason is that the abandoned land is full of unknowns. In less than half a month, first there were elves, and then there were skeletons. The races that appeared in front of the Antillians one after another forced Leon to make plans in advance. Yes, according to Aaron's analysis, the power of the elves probably would not threaten the rule of the Ximena family, and according to Andrew's description, the brain circuits of those skeletons seemed a little stupid. But Leon didn't dare to gamble, and he couldn't gamble. Who knows when a race with enough power to crush Anatolia will emerge in the abandoned land. Therefore, although the fields outside the pass are cultivated as usual, the construction of the pass cannot be sloppy. Not only the pass at the Baragori Pass, Leon came this time to select a site for the first city of Anatolia in the abandoned land. There is no way. During the previous civil war, the number of refugees Leon packed from all over the kingdom was really too many. Just from the city of Parma, tens of thousands of people were packed, so that the construction of the new city on the west bank of the White Blade River could not meet the needs of a large number of refugees for jobs. You know, although the west bank of the White Blade River is called the new city, in fact, the only thing that really requires a lot of manpower and material resources is the Pantheon built under the guise of a church. As for the houses in the new city, Leon doesn't need to call for it personally. The Antillians with strong hands-on ability can quickly build the houses themselves. The only thing Leon has to do is to order people to supervise the quality of the houses and the overall planning of the new city. Take me to see those skeletons first. Leon quickly gathered his mind and said to Andrew. Skeletons. although Leon did not have much resistance to these things due to the existence of shadow monsters. But Andrew's description was too bizarre, which had already aroused Leon's curiosity. Yes. Under the leadership of Andrew, the group slowly passed through the city wall that was under construction. Then, when Leon looked around, he saw a vast farmland that had been reclaimed, and... wait, his own people were. Leon rubbed his eyes and looked closely. I saw the Antolians dressed as farmers, pressing a weak and helpless skeleton to the ground. They took the shovels in their hands and hammered the skull of the skeleton. Leon? Those skeletons don't seem to have a clear sense of self. Andrew scratched his head and explained a little embarrassedly, it's spring plowing time, but they always like to wander between the ridges. If they are not careful, they will step on the crops that have just been planted. Leon was silent for a long time. In his impression, creatures like skeletons should theoretically be the big boss that the traversers will eventually face, right? Why did the style become a little weird after arriving here? What's the situation over there? Leon digested it for a long time. When he finally accepted this reality, a casual glance made his eyes, which had returned to calm, widen again. Andrew looked in the direction of Leon's finger. He saw a thin skeleton, hoeing the field with a farm tool. Oh, this is a situation that has only appeared in the past few days. Andrew tried to organize his words and explained, I wanted to report it today. Although the skeletons themselves have no wisdom, if the torches in the hands of the elves are poked into the skeletons' heads, those creatures seem to have some simple wisdom. We are trying a new way of farming. Leon. Captain Andrew, are you talking about a kind of fire that the elves have that can dispel the black fog? Bello, who had been standing behind Leon, asked curiously. As the mayor of the mining town and the acting mayor of the Salt Lake town, Bello, who is responsible for managing the Southwest Highlands, is also a member of the abandoned land research team. Due to Aaron's poor physical condition, Bello became the highest-ranking official in Anatolia who accompanied Leon on the investigation and research this time. Yes. Andrew also showed full respect to the young man who followed Leon. He explained, although the Marcus has previously ordered that there is no need to take the initiative to contact the elves at present. But, since the traces of the elves were discovered that day, they have never stopped scouting us. So much so that from time to time, an elf head would pop out of the black fog on the edge. And the fire of the elves was dropped when they retreated in a hurry before. As he spoke, Leon had already walked towards the skeleton who was trying hard to learn farming. It must be said that the posture of this skeleton in farming is extremely non-standard. The bones on the fingers seem to have become slightly rotten due to the invasion of time, so that the hoe in his hand falls to the ground from time to time. But he will soon bend down and pick it up again, as if he is performing an extremely solemn ceremony. And every time the skeleton swings the hoe, there will be a crackling sound of joint collision from the joints of his body, as if he may break a bone at any time due to this simple action. Looking at the skeleton trying to farm, Leon couldn't help but fall into deep thought. For the first time, he seriously considered something. What kind of bizarre world was he in now? Chapter 169, A True Perpetual Motion Machine. Leon had actually thought about this question a long time ago. But he didn't think deeply about it. Because before that, he always felt that thinking about this question was meaningless. He had already worn it, could he think about it and go back again? But looking at the skeleton in front of him who was farming, Leon thought seriously about everything in this world for the first time. From the shadow monsters, moon mushroom forests, plateau hounds at the beginning, to the elves and skeletons today. Is this a fantasy world or a world full of weirdness? At least in Leon's eyes, the style of this world has been constantly changing. But after a short solution, Leon finally made his own decision: stop struggling and face reality. Anyway, no matter how much Leon thought about it, he couldn't figure out why the skeleton in front of him would wander around this land like a corpse. Moreover, since the existence of shadow monsters can explode enchantment materials, and since the spread of black fog can drop nightmare fuel, then the farming skeleton in front of him, can it also bring some new changes to Anatolia? When this idea appeared in Leon's mind, Leon's thoughts could not help but diverge. Just now, Leon heard the conversation between Andrew and Bello clearly. When these dull skeletons were blessed with fire, it seemed that they could produce a wonderful ecological reaction, making them a special kind of creatures with simple wisdom. Yes, after leaving the black fog, these skeletons that walked out of the black fog would soon turn into powder. But this does not include the skeletons with fire in their heads. The fire from the elves burned in the empty eye sockets of the skeletons, like the rising fire of the soul, giving them simple wisdom. They are still not smart, but it seems, able to carry out some extremely simple production activities. And what does this mean? This is simply a perpetual motion machine. After all, these guys are all skeletons. They are skeletons that do not need to eat, drink, defecate, urinate, sleep, and do not need any material support or spiritual food. Snap. Well, just as Leon was imagining, accompanied by a crisp sound, the skeleton in front of him finally broke his bones in this slightly heavy labor. It fell to the ground with a snap. This is probably a comminuted fracture of the left leg caused by ankle dislocation. Can you change his bones for him? Leon asked suddenly. This. Andrew was a little confused, and then shook his head slightly blankly. I haven't tried it yet. Then give it a try. Leon immediately became interested. What should I do if the bones are broken? Change a bone. Although Leon has been influenced by modern medicine, he decided to use the simplest and most plain treatment method for the foot disease of the skeleton in front of him. Change it wherever it is broken. So, Andrew quickly dragged a skeleton to Leon. Well, it was the one that was just pressed to the ground and hammered by the farmers of Anatolia. Anyway, there is no fire in its head, and it will fall to the ground soon. It is better to make a selfless contribution, which can be regarded as a good deed. Andrew took action himself. He easily removed the left leg of the unfortunate skeleton. Then he worked on the left hip bone of the farming skeleton. Wow! Perfect! The farming skeleton, whose left leg was shattered, was stunned for a moment, and then, it seemed to realize something and stood up. Ouch! This was the first time humans heard a sound from a skeleton. There were no vocal cords, only bones, but they could make sounds. But because Leon had seen too many things he couldn't understand, he felt that the scene in front of him was normal at this time. It seemed that he felt that his left leg had returned. As everyone looked at each other in bewilderment, the vegetable-growing skeleton raised the farm tool in his hand again without hesitation and hoed the land in front of him furiously. And Leon finally retracted his gaze and said to Andrew, "You did a good job. This is all because of the wisdom of the Marcus." Hearing this, Andrew said without hesitation, "But, are there any other fires?" "Yes." Andrew's eyes turned, and he immediately answered, "However, what we know now is probably in the hands of the elves." Elves? Leon pondered. Before this, he had always been thinking about waiting for the elves to take the initiative to contact. But now, the skeleton in front of him has proved to him that if he has the fire of the elves, then the dull skeleton can also have the potential to become a tool man. And this is not a tool man in the general sense. If you don't consider the need to find bones for them to replace, this is simply a perpetual motion machine that does not require any cost at all. "Marcus, do you want me to catch a few elves?" Andrew asked eagerly. As the head of the Lapric Legion, Andrew has long been very unhappy with the elves. Yes, he did dig up the seedlings of the elves' world tree. But he didn't kill the world tree. On the contrary, the seedling of the world tree, which was almost withered, is now thriving on the land of Anatolia, and the yellowed branches and leaves have regained a touch of tender green. However, during these days, scouts from the elves would occasionally stick their heads out of the black fog. This feeling of being closely observed by other races really made Andrew quite unhappy. If it were a normal day, Andrew would have shot a few arrows at them. But Leon had previously issued a strict order not to take the initiative to conflict with the elves. This also led to him being quite helpless against those elves who came close to scout. "Can you determine the location of those elves?" "Yes. The elves can monitor the Anatolians 24 hours a day, and most of them gather at the edge of the black fog on the west side," Andrew said, patting his chest. As the commander of the Lapric Legion, he still has some observation skills. Anatolian craftsmen have newly built 3 shadow manipulators. After hesitating for a moment, Leon finally said, "Try it, but even if you can't catch them, don't hurt them. At present, Anatolian can't support a two-front war." Under the temptation of the fire of the elves, Leon finally decided to take the initiative. After all, according to the observations of the Anatolians these days, the elves living in the abandoned land should not be too powerful. And Leon doesn't plan to rob them. He just wants to make a deal with the elves. For example, the fire in the hands of the elves, or the information about the abandoned land. Although the Anatolians have already set foot on this land with the help of the shadow manipulator, it is undeniable that the Anatolians know very little about the information of the abandoned land. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Antilia has a unique diplomatic method. Elt felt like crying. After the elves had verified the news of the return of humans, Elt and his elf team, as the first elves to discover human traces, naturally took on the responsibility of observing human activities. After all, among the elves who had only heard of the existence of humans, he was the most experienced one. And this decision also made Elt feel like crying without tears. Because in his mind, the image of the Antolian army has always been lingering. So even though he was only observing from a distance at the edge of the black fog, Elt was still quite panicked. What's more, Elt had long realized that humans had actually discovered his observations during these days. However, compared to the panic in his heart, what humans did on this land was what shocked him the most. As the impressive human army opened up a piece of pure land without black fog on this land, more and more traces of humans appeared on this land. Amid the roar of a machine that Elt had never seen before. These humans who had just arrived here, holding many tools that seemed to have simple structures but that Elt could not name, kept pounding the ground. After Elt's careful recollection, he felt that this should be the way of obtaining food called farming mentioned by the Moon Elf Elders when they explained the human race. According to the Moon Elf Elders, this is a way of making a living that is far inferior to that of the elves. Under the protection of the World Tree, the Moon Elves can pick the juicy berries from the berry bushes with just a stretch of their hands, but humans, on the other hand, need to use a lot of manpower to harvest food that barely fills their stomachs. In short, after a series of theoretical analysis, the Moon Elf Elders concluded that although the human race once had enormous power, they have always lived in dire straits. But, after Elt's observations over the past few days, a question suddenly appeared in his mind. If humans are really as difficult as described to the elders, then why do they have the means to dispel the black fog? Why was he the real controller of the abandoned lands before the black fog spread? Exclamation mark. Elt couldn't figure it out. So during these days of observation, he repeatedly stuck his head out of the black fog because he was too absorbed in thinking, and then was hurriedly pulled back by Angelica and other elves. And today, Elt finally made the most important discovery. Because he saw the arrival of a young man. Behind the young man was a large group of waiters and guards. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was surrounded by people. And when the young man arrived, the human soldiers stationed here were all respectful and polite. Even the man who looked like a general also knelt on one knee. Obviously, that young man is not simple. It is even very likely that he is the leader of these humans. In addition, the young man has a handsome face that is no less handsome than an elf. When he moves, he will inadvertently exude a unique aura of a superior, an aura that he has only felt from several elders among the Moon Elves, and even the Queen of the Elves. It was also under the order of the young man that the soldiers who were originally on guard placed some large square wooden boxes with wheels on the ground not far from the elves. Will we be discovered? Angelica asked worriedly. It shouldn't be a big problem. After hesitating for a moment, Elt finally gave his own judgment. Humans have already discovered them, but have never taken any action. What does this mean? This means that humans don't want to have a direct conflict with the elves. However, Elt's judgment this time obviously had a certain deviation. Especially when those human soldiers placed those strange machines with inverted triangle structures not far from the edge of the black fog, he suddenly realized his mistake in judgment. But it was obviously too late to realize this at this time. This was the first time that Elt saw the operation of those instruments at such a close distance, and the first time to understand the means of human beings to disperse the black fog at close range. With the coming of Aurora, the black fog that originally permeated Elt seemed to be suddenly peeled off by a strong suction force. It took only a few seconds. When the elves were still in a state of confusion, their figures holding torches high appeared in front of the Antolians. Then, the baffles of several square wooden boxes placed not far from the elves suddenly opened. What appeared from them were arrows flashing with cold light. This is the latest achievement created by the craftsmen of Antolian through day and night research. Mechanical quiver. Just need to press and pull out the pin on one side of the wooden box, and sharp arrows can break through the air and shoot all creatures not far away into sieves. Originally, Leon planned to use these newly developed weapons to entertain hostile creatures that might appear in the abandoned land. But the existence of the vegetable-growing skeleton made him change his mind temporarily. He wanted to make a deal with the elves. Run. Although the situation changed in a flash, Elt still instinctively roared. However, accompanied by the sound of arrows breaking through the air. One on the left, one on the right. One in front, one behind. The arrows shot out almost in the blink of an eye, blocking all directions for the elves to escape, and firmly nailed the elves to the ground around them. At the same time, those Laprik warriors who were dressed as farmers and quietly approached the edge of the black fog also ran out quickly, taking advantage of the elf stunned time to surround these uninvited guests. The reckless observation for several days in a row made the elves relax their vigilance, which gave the soldiers of Anatolia an opportunity. It turned out that, did the Marquis of our family have such extraordinary foresight and wisdom? Forcibly calming the shock in his heart, Andrew took the lead and shouted to the elves who were trapped in the middle by the Laprik warriors, "This is Lord León Ximena, the Marquis of Anatolia. We come with a wish of peace, hoping to live in harmony with the elves on this land." Peace? Friendly? Looking at the Anatolian soldiers who surrounded him, looking at the weapons flashing with cold light. At this moment, Elt couldn't help but have a lot of questions. Chapter 171. Leon's title has become longer again. As the Queen of the Elves, Alicia felt for the first time the overly explosive diplomatic tactics of humans, or rather, the Antorians. The captured elves were finally released by Leon. After all, according to the young human lord, his actions were just to show goodwill. This made Alicia feel a little suspicious. She felt that the human brain circuit might be a little different from what she imagined. Indeed, in a sense, rescuing the captured elves can indeed be regarded as a show of goodwill. But the problem is that those elves were originally captured by humans. If humans had not captured them, there would be no such thing as captives. How can goodwill be expressed by capturing the elves first and then releasing them? Are all human brain circuits so strange? However, no matter what Alicia thought, the contact between humans and elves had been fast-forwarded by Leon alone. Of course, even if Leon did not do this, the elves could not sit still. Because the released elf brought back a very clear message to the moon elves. The land occupied by humans is expanding straight towards the moon shadow forest at a speed of more than 10 kilometers per week. The speed at which the Anatolians dispel the black fog depends on the production speed of the shadow manipulator. And the production speed of the shadow manipulator depends on the speed at which the gold diggers in the sunken wood forest supply living wood to Anatolia. Although more than 10 kilometers per week does not seem to be too much, it should be noted that the moon shadow forest occupied by the moon elves is only a few dozen kilometers away from the Baragori Pass. If the Anatolians continue to expand at this speed, it will take less than half a month, or even only 1 or 2 weeks, for the moon shadow forest belonging to the moon elves to appear in the vision of the Anatolians. So, at the emergency elders meeting, the elf queen had to state to the moon elves the reality they are facing now. Humans have expressed their goodwill to the moon elves in their unique way. When she said this, the corners of Alicia's mouth twitched a little. However, since the moon elves' understanding of humans comes almost entirely from past history, no one knows whether this way of expressing goodwill is problematic. In the final analysis, humans at least release the captured elves. So, I decided to have a brief meeting with a human lord, the guy named León Ximena. After a moment of silence, Alicia announced her decision in public. This is actually a matter of course. The increasingly dense black fog has become the biggest threat currently facing the moon elves. If humans wait until humans expand to the doorstep of the moon elves before contacting humans, then the moon elves will undoubtedly fall into passive position. Humans covet the fire in the hands of the elves, but don't the elves covet the instrument of the Anatolians that can dispel the black fog? You know, with Elt, there is also news about humans. In Elt's description, it only took a moment for the originally dense black fog to be condensed into a column of wind by the strange instrument, opening up a piece of pure land on Earth without black fog for human soldiers. And this is exactly what the elves need now. Isn't this a bit too hasty? Although they understand the current predicament of the moon elves, there are still moon elf elders who put forward different views. We know too little about humans. Who can predict whether this will be a trap set by humans? The world tree will protect me, Alicia said softly. Alicia knows the current situation of the world tree better than anyone else. If the concentration of the black fog continues to grow, Then even if the world tree has protected the elves for thousands of years, it may also usher in the fate of premature aging. What's more, different opinions are different opinions. As the queen of the elves, she is the only elf who can communicate directly with the world tree, and naturally has the power of arbitrary decision. So, 3 days later, Baragori Pass. León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia, finally had his first historic meeting with the elf queen Alicia. My lord Marquess, this is the noble leader of the Moon Elf clan, the master of the Moon Shadow Forest, and the guardian of the world tree, Her Excellency Alicia. As the elf who has the most contact with humans, Elle took the initiative to introduce. Such a long name? Andrew, who was standing aside, seemed to feel a sense of provocation. The name of his lord must not be overshadowed by the elf queen in front of him. Thinking of this, he immediately took a step forward and began his performance by analogy. In this case, the one standing in front of you is the only Marquess of the Andal Kingdom, the patriarch of the Ximena family, the one who broke the siege of the royal capital, the person who governs the southern part of the kingdom, the expeller of the Plateau Hounds, the pioneer of the southwestern highlands, the common lord of the ancestors of Antolians and Heirs, the only leader of the southern mountain people, the explorer of the abandoned land, the holy pioneer who dispelled the black fog, the only heir of ancient magic, the honorable and great León Ximena. Alicia, degree Cyrillic letter de degree, Elt, O Leon. Unconsciously, it seems, that his name has become longer again. The confrontation when they first met was only brief. Leon also took the opportunity of Andrew introducing his name to observe the elf queen in front of him. Well, she has a good figure and great skin. And according to the information he got from Elt, the elven queen in front of him was not a little young because of her race, she was really only in her early 20s. So, she should be easier to fool than the old guys in the kingdom, right? After realizing this, Leon couldn't help but think. On one side is the human lord, and on the other side is the elven queen. Since this is only the first contact between the two sides, it is destined that the meeting will not last too long. Therefore, the two of them got straight to the point as soon as they opened their mouths. Even the agreement reached in the end was very simple. The elves used 20 seeds of the eternal fire to exchange for a world tree sapling dug up by the Antorians. The Antorians recognized the sovereignty of the Moon Elves over the Moon Shadow Forest, and the Moon Elves were not allowed to interfere with the expansion of the Antorians in the abandoned land. As for sensitive topics such as the Shadow Manipulator and dispelling the black fog, even though Alicia wanted to talk about it, Leon always avoided the topic. The reason is very simple. Perhaps because they have lived in the abandoned land for a long time, the Moon Elves are very simple-minded, and they can achieve unexpected results with a little trickery. So long before Alicia arrived, even when Elt and others were just captured, Leon relied on his superb words that he had practiced among the old hands of the Andal Kingdom to get a lot of information he wanted to know. From the situation of the Moon Elves to the distribution of forces in the abandoned land, from the eternal fire to the world tree seedling. Leon has touched on everything, and thus learned a definite fact. The longer he delays, the higher the price the elves can offer. He has even considered what card he should play next. Why not? Each side sends an envoy. Finally, after repeated consideration, Alicia couldn't help but suggest. This plot is accidentally a bit dragged out, I will go back to Antolia tomorrow. Collection post, what is the name of the first new city opened by Antolia in the abandoned land? Those whose names are adopted will receive an exclusive Chinese Valentine's Day red envelope from the book club. The amount is not large, but it's just a token of appreciation. Chapter 172 No one understands the world tree better than me. Okay. Leon readily agreed to Alicia's proposal. After persuading Elt, although Leon could not say that he had completely mastered the details of the Moon Elves, he could basically say that he had mastered them. So, he was not actually worried that sending envoys to each other would leak information about Antolia. Let it leak. Not only must it leak, but in addition to the key technology, it must leak out. Because apart from the benefits of making the elves feel timid, Leon really couldn't think of any harm to Antolia. Moreover, if they really had to fight, Antolia might not win, but it would definitely not lose. Leon was extremely confident about this. The military strength of the two sides was actually not much different. Leon had 3 legions in his hands, the Lapric Legion, the Antolian Militia, and the Antolian Mercenaries. The Elf Queen controlled the most elite elven longbowmen and moon spring guards of the Moon Elves. However, In any war from ancient times to the present, the strength of the army was actually only one aspect that determined the outcome of the war. Anatolia, located north of the mountains, firmly controls the Baragori Pass connecting the abandoned lands and Anatolia, and has even begun to build a pass at the Baragori Pass. This is the geographical advantage. But what about the elves? The Moon Shadow Forest is surrounded by open plains. In addition to the obstruction of the mountains in the north, as long as León wants, the soldiers of Anatolia can attack the elves in the east, west and south. What's more, León's advantage is not just reflected in geography. Anatolia used to be barren, but after the civil war that affected the entire Andal kingdom and León's diligent governance, Anatolia, as León's dragons rise, is enough to provide him with a steady stream of soldiers and food. As for the elves, even the world tree that they regard as a treasure has aged prematurely. Even if the elves have dozens of elder-level masters, it is useless in the case of a large army fighting. Anatolia is not without magicians. And there are not only mages, but also little red bottles. And Albert. At the same time, as the Marquis of Anatolia, León is the largest noble in the southern part of the Andal kingdom. Pay attention to this prefix. Andal kingdom. León's expansion of the abandoned land is legal. Not to mention the claim he made for himself, as a Marquis, he also has a pioneering order recognized by Wilbert I. If the elves dare to attack Anatolia, they are attacking the Andal kingdom. As a novice paradox player, León has a deep understanding of how annoying the many small country allies that were blown up by the attack on Shinra are. Even if it really comes to a critical moment, it is not a difficult thing to spend money to recruit militia from his vassals. After all, León did use the substitute money to exempt the vassals from military obligations, but that was in peacetime. Based on the above considerations, León naturally agreed to Ashley's proposal. Journey. León looked at the crowd standing behind him and immediately called out a familiar name. For this talent who has detonated the gold rush of the entire Andal kingdom with his own strength, León actually intended to place him in the post of collecting intelligence and public opinion in Anatolia. However, this is a little too early for Anatolia now. Although the establishment of the intelligence network has already taken shape, it is by no means possible to see results in a short period of time. In this case, Johnny will be moved to a more useful position first. Even if Johnny's understanding of elves is similar to the elves' understanding of humans, most of it comes from the distant past. But he is already the one who knows the elves best in the entire land of Anatolia. Mr. Marcus. The former bard trembled all over and walked out of the crowd behind León with great joy. I appoint you as the special ambassador of Anatolia to the Moon Shadow Forest, responsible for handling all matters between humans and moon elves. Johnny. This is a promotion. As a former wandering poet, he had sung many stories about elves, no, legends and poems about elves. Therefore, what made him most happy was not the promotion, but the responsibilities of the position itself. Which legend of the Andal kingdom does not include elves? And now, Journey. He is about to become the ambassador appointed by León himself. Become the first human to enter the Moon Shadow Forest. This means that he will also experience everything in the legend firsthand, and even, become a legend. At this moment, Journey thought of many things in his mind. He could even imagine that in a few years, the name Journey would be engraved in the history of Anatolia and remembered by the world. The root of all this was that on the afternoon when he discovered a tree guard, he fled to the young lord while being seriously injured and confused. Since then, the gears of fate have turned, and his life trajectory has also changed. From the initial voice of organizing the gold rush to now being the ambassador of Anatolia. I am willing to serve the Marquis. In an instant, Journey's eyes became extremely firm. Alicia had never expected that the young lord would make a decision so quickly. But this proposal was made by her, and she couldn't drag it out for a long time, right? If so, doesn't it mean that the elves have no one to use? However, Alicia's eyes also swept to the people behind her. It seems that he really has no one to use. Elt. When he heard that he was named again, Elt felt that his heart was about to jump out. At this time, he had already realized how much information about the elves he had leaked when he was captured before. He was really not a qualified diplomatic talent. But Alicia couldn't care so much. She was an elf queen with a competitive spirit. The elves are talented people. She had only one thought in her mind, that is, she must not be outdone by humans. In that case, I'll leave this mission to you. Alicia's decision made Elt want to cry, but he couldn't say no. He had to bite the bullet and take the job. Perfect. Hearing this, Leon's heart couldn't help but jump a little. Although Elt was only captured once, Leon had already figured out the temperament of this elf. Not to mention figuring out the elf's bottom line, Leon even had the confidence to find out the elf's bottom line from Elt's mouth. The short meeting will eventually end. And after Leon measured the land in the abandoned land with his own feet, he finally completed the site selection for the first city of the Ximena family in the abandoned land. At the foot of the world tree with yellow leaves, the Antolians pressed the fast forward button twice to communicate with the elves. The first time was at the foot of the world tree. Andrew ordered people to dig up 2 world tree seedlings planted by the elves. The second time, Leon personally demonstrated his overly explosive diplomatic means. But the reason for choosing this site is naturally not to commemorate these. According to the elves, the world tree possesses the holy power of nature. Although the height of this world tree is much lower than the one that protects the moon elves in the moon shadow forest, it is also a world tree. It is a pioneering artifact that can make the monsters living in the black fog stay away spontaneously. What's more, if a city is built here, it will not only be equivalent to adding a holy buff to the people who come here to open up the wasteland, but also make this place the first benchmark city built by the Antolians in the abandoned land. Leon asked himself, in this world, absolutely no one knows the world tree better than him. With a scientific instrument, a nearly bug-like relic of the ancestors, Leon's understanding of the world tree can be said to be unique. In his opinion, the reason why the world tree does not grow well is not just the influence of the black fog. The land under his feet, which has been eroded by the black fog for thousands of years, is also the culprit of all this. When it comes to land, we have to mention the Antolian land compactor. Since the land compactor can transform the originally hard and compacted land into black soil suitable for the growth of crops, it must be able to transform it into soil suitable for the physique of every world tree baby. If the world tree seedlings in the hands of the Antolians can grow more vigorously than the world tree seedlings in the hands of the elves, then doesn't Leon have another card to blackmail after the shadow manipulator? What is the point of exhausting the pond to catch fish? Sustainable exhaustion of the pond to catch fish is the right way in the world. And this is exactly why Leon returned a seedling and kept one seedling for himself in the previous meeting. Experimental group and control group. Anyone who has studied junior high school biology must know it. When the elves, who regarded the world tree as a treasure, saw the world tree with yellow leaves showing a tender green color, and saw the world tree seedlings blooming with magnificent vitality in the hands of humans, Leon's bad taste has made him eager to see the elves' eyes that are more uncomfortable than eating a fly. Fort Wilson. This first new city built by the Antolians in the abandoned land is called Fort Wilson. After extremely careful consideration, Leon finally made his decision. There are 2 mountain tribes living in Antolia that have deep roots with the ancestors. The Laprik tribe is just one of them. Exploring the abandoned land is Leon's promise to the Laprik tribe, and it is also the Laprik tribe that has the name of an independent legion. But as a lord, Leon must not favor one over the other. Balance. This is a very important point. Even though the mountain people today are extremely loyal to the Ximena family, before Leon completely shapes the national identity of Greater Antolia, he must consider the ideas of various tribes. Who discovered the Baragori Pass? It was the Navajo tribe. So, naming this city adjacent to the Baragori Pass after Wilson Navajo, a member of the Navajo tribe who discovered the Baragori Pass, is the most appropriate. It's impossible that all the benefits are taken by the Laprik tribe, right? Return. After finally completing everything he wanted to do in the abandoned land, Leon immediately gave the order to everyone behind him to return to the Thorn territory. As an envoy from the elves, Elt, who followed Leon back, finally got a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg of Antolia. After passing through the narrow Baragori Pass, what appeared in front of him was a piece of land without any black fog. Elt was sure that the black fog did not appear here first and then be dispersed by the Antorians, but that the black fog was diffused, and it might not even cross the mountains at all. After realizing this, Elt was completely confused. The elves have lived under the black fog for thousands of years. During these thousands of years, the diffuse black fog has limited the activities of the moon elves to the moon shadow forest, so that they know very little about the outside world. They only think that under the protection of the world tree, they are the luckiest race in the world. However, who would have thought? On the other side of the mountains, humans have long been free from the harassment of the black fog. At this moment, Elt felt that his worldview was collapsing and his outlook on life was shattered. In addition, the town located in the southwest highlands was always impacting Elt's mind, and the Antorian miners who drove the tall-legged strange birds to mine on the spot also greatly broadened Elt's horizons. Could it be that the reason why the Antolians wanted to obtain the fire of the Moon Elves was because they set their sights on the skeletons wandering in the abandoned land? The elves who had lived in the abandoned land for thousands of years certainly knew that after obtaining the fire of the eternal fire, the stupid skeletons would have simple wisdom. But the pride of the elves made them disdain it. In their view, even if they had simple wisdom, those skeletons would only change from stupid skeletons to stupid skeletons, but they never thought of making those skeletons tools in their hands. However, from the tall-legged strange birds driven by the Antolian miners to mine, Elt realized for the first time the wisdom possessed by humans. This major discovery that was enough to shock Elt for a whole year made him a little depressed. However, Leon didn't have the mind to take care of the mood of the elf messenger at this time. At this time, he just wanted to return to the Thorn territory, return to his lord's study, and return to the scientific instruments. The purification of the Black Fog does not only mean the expansion of the land. When Leon returned, he also brought back a large number of strange plants from the abandoned land. He needed to know their functions, because only in this way can Leon truly anchor the expansion direction of the Antolians in the abandoned land. This is particularly important. Thanks to the bug friend Yi Wens for naming the new city. If you are in the group, please @me and receive a limited red envelope for the Chinese Valentine's Day. The group number is in the introduction. Chapter 173. Leon sets his sights on the church's treasury. Father Matthew stood at the edge of the road, looking far to the north of Antolia. "Help me check. Are you dressed neatly?" He tidied his priest robes with some trepidation, but always felt that something was missing, and asked the waiter beside him. It's fine." "No. No, no. It's very wrong." Father Matthews couldn't help but frown. He lowered his head and stared at the white holy robes he was wearing, as if he finally realized where the problem was. "Bring me my canine tooth necklace." "Father Matthews, didn't you say you were going to welcome the cardinal of the church today? If you wear the Antolia canine tooth necklace, I'm used to it." Father Matthews shook his head, grabbed the necklace given by León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia, from the waiter's hand, and carefully put it on his neck. This is a necklace made of the canine teeth of a Highland hound. With a slightly hideous necklace, covering Father Matthews's white woolen holy belt. "Huh?" He breathed a long sigh of relief, and finally felt a lot more comfortable in his heart. Although Father Matthews has completed his change of mind, because the people of Antolia have long been disgusted with the church, he usually wears a coat with strong Antolia characteristics when he goes out. Now, he suddenly changed back to his priest robe, but he was a little uncomfortable. For Father Matthews, today is a very special day. The civil war in the Andal Kingdom not only affected the nobles in the kingdom, but also affected the churches throughout the kingdom. As the state religion of the Andal Kingdom, although the rebellious nobles did not fight against the respected bishops, this did not mean that the robbers who broke out in various places during the civil war would also not harm the church. The church is rich. This is the consensus of many people in the Andal Kingdom. The tithes paid by various places every year alone add up to an astronomical figure. This also led to the fact that at the end of the Andal Civil War, not only the nobles and mercenaries were killed and injured, but also the bishops of the major dioceses, especially in the south of the kingdom. And now, the civil war in the kingdom has long been settled. Many positions in the major dioceses have been vacated. Father Matthews, who was approved by Leon, naturally set his sights on a higher position. Bishop. If it were in the past, he would not even dare to think about the position of bishop. What is Antolia? This is a famous place with mixed beliefs in the Andal Kingdom. Almost all of his previous priests were killed with a knife. It was a blessing to be able to live safely. How could he expect to go further? But Leon's strong support for the church built on the west bank of the White Blade River gave Father Matthews enough confidence. He also wants to make progress. After living in Antolia for such a long time, Father Matthews basically understood the character of the young lord. Regarding the church, Leon is actually not as eager to fight and kill as his father. Although he owed tithes, he was also an extremely devout believer. This was officially certified by Father Matthews. There was no way, if anyone dared to say that the Honorable Marquess of Antolia was not pious, Leon would dare to give him a quick death. In addition, the scale of the church built by Leon was indeed a spectacle. Matthews naturally had to think about arching it up according to Leon's requirements before the church was completed and transformed into the Antolia pantheon. So, Matthews was bound to get the position of bishop in the south of the kingdom. You know, this decision was strongly supported by León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia. And his purpose was quite simple. If Matthews became a bishop, not to mention that the tithes of Antolia could continue to be in arrears in the name of building a church, even the tithes paid by other nobles in the south of the kingdom, Leon could also cheat a few percent. Good guy. The reason why he was obsessed with the position of bishop was entirely because he saw the hidden benefits of collecting tithes. If the church's charlatans knew this, they would definitely vomit 3 liters of blood and become directly angry. But it was precisely because of this extremely simple purpose that Aaron, as the chief steward of Antolia, also took out 12 points of energy, and issued strict orders to the people of Antolia. During the period when the cardinal stayed in Antolia, the church's charlatans must not be killed, and the church must not be insulted in front of the clergy. If you want to scold, wait until the cardinal leaves, and if you want to fight, wait until you leave Antolia. Father Matthews. The cardinal is here. Hearing this, Matthews hurriedly looked not far away. I saw a team of luxurious carriages slowly passing through the endless mushroom forest and appeared in my field of vision. As the church's convoy slowly drove into the territory of Antolia, Cardinal Maxim's mood at this time was actually a little uneasy. In the Andal Kingdom, there are a total of 6 cardinals directly appointed by the Pope. There are 2 in the west of the kingdom, and 1 each in the east, north, south and the capital. Although this is the first time that Maxim has come to Antolia, he has indeed heard of the great reputation of this land. After all, there was an appalling incident where 6 priests were replaced in 1 year. If León Ximena had not become the only Marquess of the Andal Kingdom, and if Antolia's priest Matthews had not guaranteed the safety of this trip countless times when he set off, Maxim really didn't want to come. But he had to come. Because under Leon's operation, letters recommending Antolia's priest to become the bishop of the south had already filled his desk. According to the church's practice, field investigations are a must before filing the vacancy. But in Maxim's heart, he really couldn't think of what capital the Antolia priest had to compete for the bishop. Why? Because the Antolians had no reverence for the church? Because the Ximena family had been in arrears of tithes for decades? Although after becoming a marquess, Leon gave a very reasonable explanation for the arrears of tithes, building a church for the Antolians to make pilgrimages. But, is this really possible? Anyway, Maxim didn't believe it. Welcome to the cardinal. The voice from outside the carriage quickly brought Maxim's thoughts back to reality. He lifted the curtain covering the window and looked out. Matthews, the only priest in Antolia, was standing on the side of the road in a white robe. But, looking at the canine tooth necklace worn by Father Matthews around his neck, Maxim's face began to twist abnormally. Help, is it too late to run now? Chapter 174. The cardinal's voice trembled. While Matthews was waiting for the arrival of the cardinal in the suburbs of Thorn territory, Aaron was also trying his best to carry out a series of preparations in the city of Thorn territory. Apart from anything else, this is the first time that the cardinal of the church has come to Antolia. No matter what, he must be sent back alive. This is really not an exaggeration. The hatred of the Antolians for the church has a long history. In this era, there is almost no noble who does not exploit the people. Even Leon, who is a time traveler, is just a little more sophisticated in his means of exploitation. So, before Leon, there were many unreliable rulers in Antolia. But, the smartest thing about the patriarchs of the Ximena family is to divert conflicts. Since Antolia faces the threat of the year of the jackdaw every 5 years, so, how can we exploit the people while letting the people and the Ximena family overcome the difficulties together? The answer is actually very simple. That is to put all the bad things that the Ximena family has done on the head of the church. For example, what should a lord do if he is short of money? Of course, he has to collect taxes from his subjects. If the Ximena family wants to collect 3 Andal silver coins from each subject, they must first let the priest shout out the rhetoric of levying a tithe. People in the Syria also like to compromise. Under the struggle and opposition of the great Ximena family, the original tax increase of 10 Andal silver coins was reduced to 3, and the subjects would naturally be grateful for this. To be honest, when Leon discovered this while reading the family's secret history, he couldn't help but deeply admire the wisdom of his family's ancestors. In addition, the church's rhetoric was unpopular in Antolia, so after this and that, the Antolian people's resistance to the church was increasing. So, in order for the cardinal to leave Antolia alive, Aaron had to take precautions in advance. It is imperative that officials at all levels convey the spirit of this meeting to all the subjects of Antolia. After summoning all the officials of Thorn Ridge, Aaron said earnestly, "The purpose of receiving the cardinal is to allow the Antolians to pass on their influence to the church. At that time, not only can the tithes of the people continue to be in arrears, but Antolians can also intercept the tithes paid by other territories. From priests to bishops, to cardinals and popes. The church has always had a set of established procedures for the payment of tithes. This also gives the Antolians the possibility to profit from it. Therefore, Aaron naturally cannot be careless about such a major event that benefits Antolia, or the Ximena family. 1. The Antolian militia must be alert and protect the safety of the cardinal and his entourage. This time, the cardinal will definitely visit the construction site on the other side of the White Blade River to visit the church under construction. There are a large number of people gathered there. We must be vigilant and not make any mistakes. I understand. At present, all the Laprid Corps are stationed in the abandoned land, and the Antolian mercenaries are also responsible for many tasks at the same time, so the task of protecting the cardinal naturally falls on the Antolian militia. But, after hesitating for a moment, one still asked, what if the cardinal does not let Father Matthews be promoted to bishop? What then? Hearing this, the old butler's originally drooping eyes suddenly flashed a cold color. He will definitely agree. Although he was somewhat reluctant in his heart, the cardinal had to accept the explanation given by Father Matthews. According to Father Matthews, the deaths of previous priests were all due to their own corruption and oppression of the people. Therefore, as a priest who is dedicated to goodness and willing to go through fire and water for the church, Matthews had to find another way to preach and give faith. If it were someone else, the host bishop would probably not believe it. But the person who said this was Father Matthews. The Duke of Galicia, who knew why Matthews came to Antolia, had already passed the first 7 days. Therefore, in the heart of the cardinal, Matthews is a priest who is ready to die. And the explanation he gave is naturally credible. The soldiers around are all here to protect your safety. Realizing that the cardinal's eyes were occasionally glancing at the soldiers around him, Father Matthews hurriedly said, "You also know that the religious beliefs in Antolia have always been very complicated. Although the Marquess and many officials in the territory are extremely pious, there will always be some pagans with dark hearts wandering around this land. This trip is to a church that is under construction, so we must try our best to ensure your safety." Passing through the old city of Thorn Ridge and across the bridge across the White Blade River, the predecessor of the Antolia Pantheon, the Antolia Cathedral, appeared in front of Bishop Maxim. Although the church was not yet completed at this time, the huge construction site in front of Bishop Maxim still brought a little bit of Antolia shock to the cardinal. The Antolians are actually building a church? And, it's such a large church? Could it be that what Father Matthews said is true? Exclamation mark. As a genuine cardinal, Maxim has seen countless churches. But he was sure that even the church in Essex, the capital of Andal, could not be compared with the church before his eyes. When he arrived, the craftsmen of Antolia were carving exquisite reliefs on the outer wall of the church, and the green trees planted around the church reflected the mottled light and shadow. The window sashes that had not yet been installed were piled in the corner of the wall, and the colored pigments rendered a beautiful color. This. For a moment, Bishop Maxim was stunned. Until 3 or 5 children ran from a distance, passed through the crowd around, and presented the flowers in their hands to the bishop who came from afar. "May the God of light bless you." Although he felt a little strange in his heart, the childish voice of the child still made him feel relaxed and happy. "The God of light will surely bless this land," Maxim said with a little emotion. "But you will let Father Matthews become the bishop, right?" When the innocent voice of the child once again reached Maxim's ears, the cardinal of the southern kingdom was suddenly startled. He finally realized why he felt something was wrong before. Because he didn't seem to see any reverence for the God of light in the eyes of the children. At this moment, Maxim couldn't help but look around again. The Antolian soldiers who were originally around him had already withdrawn at some point. A group of craftsmen dressed as people were surrounding him, waiting for his reply with their slightly cold eyes. Although Aaron ordered not to use violence against the cardinal, those unfriendly eyes still made Maxim a little scared. "Don't worry, Bishop, they are all the most devout believers." Father Matthew seemed to be aware of the bishop's mental state, and showed a brilliant smile at the right time. "They are indeed pious. But the object of piety is not the God of light. Matthews thought silently in his heart. You will make Father Matthews a bishop, right? The child who presented the bouquet repeated. Of course. Matthews is a devout priest and will definitely become an upright bishop. At this moment, Maxim's voice trembled a little, even with a hint of tears. He had no doubt. If he refused, he probably wouldn't be able to leave the construction site. Because behind those craftsmen dressed as subjects, Maxim could vaguely see some flashes of edge. It's Chinese Valentine's Day. I wish all book friends good fortune and longevity. Let me see if there are any single dogs who don't celebrate Chinese Valentine's Day. Chapter 175, Antolia cannot live without Niu. For the people living on this land, Antolia in early spring is full of vigor and vitality. Especially this year. Gold diggers from all over the kingdom dug out heavy gold in the sunken wood forest. The dwarf craftsmen from Dolan received generous rewards from the Ximena family. The Thorn territory, located on the banks of the White Blade River, naturally became the town where they most often came to have fun after becoming rich overnight. And this finally led to a series of shops, taverns and hostels emerging in the CBD of the Thorn territory, so that Antolia, which originally had no business to speak of, finally had some new stores after many years. Of course, in addition to the tavern, the Antolia Bank located in the center of the CBD has also become the most frequented place for gold diggers. Although a management fee needs to be paid, there is no need to worry about the theft of the wealth accumulated through hard work. This just meets the needs of gold diggers. What's more, not only in Antolia Bank stores have appeared in Greywater Castle and Parma City, which makes the gold diggers feel extremely convenient. However, in this vibrant atmosphere, what makes Leon most excited is actually the road connecting the Southwest Highlands and the Thorn territory. After more than half a year of construction, this road that Leon has high hopes for was finally completed under Sherman's supervision. It was not until this moment that Leon truly regarded the Southwest Highlands as the Ximena family's possession. Roads are the premise of development. The road connecting the two places greatly shortens the journey from the mining town to the Thorn territory, and also allows the people between the two places to travel back and forth to visit their relatives. Well done. In the study of the Lord's castle, Leon highly praised the diligent craftsman with the title of honorary knight. Next, Sherman looked as if he was about to say something, and looked at the young Marcus in front of him with excitement. He had seen it clearly. As long as Leon is still the Marcus of Antolia, he will never lack work. Build roads and bridges, and construct new cities. Since Leon became the ruler of this land, Sherman has never stopped for a day. Although in the eyes of many people, slacking off is a blessing in life. But as a craftsman who has been neglected for nearly 20 years, Sherman has long been aware of being a qualified worker. He is tired of slacking off and wishes Leon could fill everything in his life with all kinds of things. Fort Wilson. Facing this dwarf craftsman who took the initiative to find work, Leon was 120% satisfied, so he quickly gave his answer. Fort Wilson is the first city built by the people of Antolia in the abandoned land. I plan to hand over the construction of this city to you. I don't ask for many. This city is a landmark project of Antolia. I don't ask you to build it into a city that the world desires, but the most basic requirement is to build it into a city that the elves desire. At least, every elf who sees that city should have a sincere awe of Antolia. Hearing this, Sherman couldn't help but show an obvious joy on his face. As you wish. My honorable Marcus. Sherman's best skill is building cities. The old city of Thorn territory in front of us was built by Sherman. Sherman will definitely not let down the Marcus trust. Sherman knows that the Marcus must be. Leon looked at the chatterbox dwarf in front of him helplessly, but finally waved his hand, signaling the waiter beside him to invite him out. Because he was very sure that if he didn't physically interrupt, then the dwarf in front of him would probably be able to talk endlessly until nightfall. As the wooden door of the study closed again, Leon was finally able to continue to focus his eyes on the papyrus placed on the table. If the seedlings of the world tree are removed, then during this trip to the abandoned land, the Antolians found a total of 3 strange plants on that land. Monkey tail grass, stone fruit tree, and bee thorn. The 3 plants are now obviously unique vegetation that only grows in the abandoned land. As long as Antolia firmly controls the land covered by black fog, a natural monopoly has been formed. However, compared with the moon mushroom tree that brought a lot of benefits to Antolia, the plants pulled from the abandoned land this time made Leon feel a little disappointed. The reason is also very simple. it is not very useful. For example, the stone fruit tree that Leon brought back from the abandoned land is probably a new variety that had not appeared when the ancestors were still there. Even though Leon took a lot of effort to stuff the stone fruit into the groove of the scientific instrument, which was like a bug on weekdays, never gave Leon a positive answer. This led to Leon only being able to experience the use of the stone fruit tree by himself. After his careful analysis, Leon quickly came to the conclusion that it was useless. The stone fruit of the stone fruit tree is really just some ordinary stones. In addition to being very hard and biting, Leon really didn't find any other possible effects. In the land newly opened up by the Antolians, the stone fruit trees can't be said to be everywhere, but they are basically everywhere. Fortunately, the other two plants don't seem to be useless. Bee thorns were also born after the ancestors, but the mucus secreted on its surface not only has a faint fragrance, but also exudes a strong sweetness. Leon naturally handed it over to the farmers in Anatolia who specialize in plants. If it is developed properly, Anatolia may have a dessert similar to honey in the near future. As for monkey-tail grass, this plant, which was supposed to be the most useless plant in Leon's opinion, gave Leon some surprises. However, this surprise did not come from its own value. According to the records on the papyrus, monkey-tail grass is the best high-quality forage grass that Agar cattle like to eat. Agar cattle. Although the name sounds ugly, it is a kind of cattle that can be domesticated. During the existence of the Agars Empire, the bull cavalry of the Altog tribe once ran rampant on that land. Even in the glorious Agars Empire, it was a powerful cavalry that ranked first. And this naturally made Leon's thoughts gradually diverge. It has always been Leon's wish to form a powerful cavalry, but there are no good pastures and commendable horse breeds in Anatolia, located in the south of the kingdom. Even the horse under Leon's crotch was captured by Leon's father from someone else. But today, Leon finally sees the hope and possibility of forming a cavalry corps. Although the name of the bull cavalry sounds a bit strange, Leon doesn't care so much. Even though the civil war in the kingdom has subsided, the situation on the continent has become more complicated. Anatolia can't live without bulls, just like the West can't live without Jerusalem. Send a message to Andrew immediately. Let his pioneering team prioritize the deployment of shadow manipulators in areas where monkey-tail grass exists. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.